And we're live.
Good morning, everyone. If you could take a roll call, please, Mike.
Warden Danielson,
I'm here.
Councillor Moffat,
I'm present.
Councillor Roberts.
Sorry, trouble with my mouse. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy,
Present.
Councillor Burton,
Present.
Councillor Ryle,
Present.
Councillor DeVolen,
Here.
and Councillor Shell.
Present.
Thank you.
So I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for today. Councillor Roberts,
Yes, if I may, request an addition to the agenda under the Roads Department. I sent it to you, sorry for the late notice, just only yesterday in the Warden. So if it doesn't pass to be discussed today, I respect that. But I would like to be able to talk during the road section about, if possible, for a staff to bring a report back to council to determine what would be involved, to do a further study or get comments from ACOM, who did our 2017 study regarding the intersection at Wallings Road and County Road 21. I'll speak more to that if it gets approved to be added to the agenda.
council's thoughts on making that addition to the agenda? Councillor Kennedy,
Yeah, I'm in favor of bringing that forward.
Councillor Moffat,
Yeah, I don't have a problem adding it. It is, as Councillor Roberts noted, it's a bit late to the party, and I don't certainly feel I'm up to speed to be able to have much conversation around it. But maybe that's add it to the agenda, have the conversation, and then figure it out from there. It's a long time ago.
okay, so that would be moved by Councillor Roberts, and could I have a seconder then for the addition to the agenda? Councillor Burton, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that the November 10th, 2021 Haliburton County Committee of the Whole agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none. We have no delegations today. So could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes from October the 13th? Councillor Shell and Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that the minutes from the October 13th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. I don't believe that we have any correspondence under this section. So we'll move right into roads, starting with the status report.
Good morning.
Good morning, Robert. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you.
So if you could go over your status report, please.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, Warden and Council. Our November status report for capital projects. Hopefully Council will notice a whole bunch of things got completed since our last update in October. There were a couple items that weren't completed. We had one of the extra roads that Council approved back in July. The contractor started a little late, and we did not want them to complete that road this year in improper conditions. So we've proposed it, and we'll be talking about it later in the budget sessions. The contractor for the surface treatment will be completing the pavement markings for the roads. So there are a few roads that don't have their pavement markings on right now, but they're actually starting today. And as weather permits, we'll complete that. One other item that's noted in the capital projects is we did award the design for the York River Bridge. That's for new work. And again, we'll be discussing that in the budget period, but that assignment's been awarded to DM Wills. On the operations side, we did have our radar speed sign was stolen, but then was recovered later by some Highlands East staff in a bush. So we've been looking at it. It's got some damage, but it still appears to work. So we've had over the years some issues with people and theft. We've had at least 2 stolen completely and not returned. So we're down to just having the 1, and we have been investigating possibly getting a second radar sign, because they do, in short-term bursts, help in certain areas as we move them around the county. So that's just one thing to note on there. On our maintenance report, everything's proceeding there on the rail trail. The southerly part of the contract has been completed. The northerly part is lagging a bit. We're a little unhappy with the progress there. And to Councillor Roberts' question about the one area by Ritchie Road, that will be an area, it is a little bit soft, and it is an area that will be addressed as part of next year's. It's the first section that will be done next year. It's kind of the missing link this year that we're not doing. So there's about 300 to 400 meters where we agree that it's not quite optimal for bike riding, but it is good for all other activities. And I think that's, I guess, one other good one is the Great All that Council approved last time. We're actually receiving delivery of it today. So instead of waiting 12 to 14 months from now, we're taking possession of the Great All today. So I think staff are very appreciative of Council's support on that endeavor.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. And thank you, Robert, for that report, and also commenting on the rail trail. There's been a lot of people who know that I enjoy bike riding. So those people have been reaching out to me, and absolute fantastic compliments on the work that our Marquis Snow and Ice did on that southerly portion. Because of the glorious weather we've been having in November, a lot of people have been taking advantage of biking this late in the season. And I actually walked it from Francis Road to about 3 kilometers down, and it's lovely. And they did a great job. So thank you very much for reporting on that. And then if I could, just one further question that's in the operational side, which is to do with the review of the county sign bylaw. It says winter of 2021, so I'm not sure if that means like still the winter still to come. But a long time ago we had talked about combining sort of tourism and the county sign bylaw. So if we are reviewing the sign bylaw, it's not just simple things like how many meters back or how many signs were allowed. At one point there was a sort of proliferation of one particular realtor. We're like, how many signs is one realtor allowed to have? So there was a whole bevy of things. And also in terms of combining it with the sort of the tourism or economic development department, would we have a standard sort of look for font and color and style, which some other counties do? I believe it was Bruce or somewhere in the Huron area, Bruce Peninsula area, where I had been at a conference and they had a sort of standard. So if anyone wanted to do a sign like this was the look. So if we're doing a sign bylaw review, we should be looking at it in a fulsome way with our maybe new economic development and tourism coordinator or director, pardon me.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Good way to approach it.
And yes, through the warden, to the councillor, yes, the intent is, as you know, we've just recently got the new director and hopefully a manager of tourism shortly thereafter if interviews and whatnot go well. So the idea is to look at that and bring them into the fold. We're also related to the rail trail, also looking at that destination or informational signing and interpretive signing. So to look holistically at the county and the different signing options that could be available. And it won't be a quick review. He just showed up last week, and we'll work with that. And we've got a meeting there at the end of the month with First Nations regarding some of the interpretive signing. So things are moving ahead on those fronts, and we are trying to look again holistically at signing options.
Any other questions or comments on the status report? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to accept the report? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Kennedy.
By Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Kennedy, be it resolved that the November 2021 status reports on capital projects, operations, and road maintenance be received for information by Haliburton County Committee of the Whole.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next is a discussion about the proposed development on Wallings Way and issues associated with roads. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Maybe if I started off, and then because we've got Robert on screen just to see what's involved. And the reason I requested this be added to the agenda is we're in a little bit of a juggernaut, and staff are too. We, as County Council, adopted a report by ACOM in 2017, which talks about any further development in that particular intersection. And the only two choices that ACOM study says are a full closure, which means that that road is closed and all traffic is diverted through from Wallings Road through to Haliburton, or a partial closure, which would have allowed the bus lines in the 3 residential properties at the beginning of the road to access it, but the rest of any kind of development. The problem with that is it assumes a 20-meter road through property that the municipality of Dysart owns, of which we only have 11 meters that's designated as a right-of-way or roadway. And we had a delegation yesterday from Jody Curry, Places for People, whom we've been in negotiations with to try to transfer some land so that they can build a 48-unit affordable housing project on that property. Dysart Council feels they're a great partner to create affordable housing that is unique and particular and understand the needs of the residents of Haliburton County. But when we take 20 meters out of this fairly awkward, weird piece of land, if you will, awkward shape, there's a bit of a roadway, so there's other issues to do with that, the project is not viable. And that is the dilemma. So what I was requesting is not necessarily for a fulsome discussion, but I, as an individual councillor at the county table, can't direct staff to do anything. And I would ask if county council could ask staff to bring a report back in future to county council as to what would be involved to do a further study or get comments from ACOM regarding our original 2017 study to look at alternate solutions to the intersection of County Road 21 and Wallings Road that don't require a 20-meter road through the Dysart property. And in the email that I had sent to the warden and to the CAO that was distributed, there were 3 specific questions. And one is to ask whomever, either an independent traffic study company or ACOM, who was our ones that did our study. And questions is, could Wallings Road be a one-way in only? Could Wallings Road be a no left turn, buses exempt? And could Wallings Road and County Road 21 intersection be developed for a full set of traffic lights where the left turn signal, so the stop on County Road 21, is only triggered by a pressure pad by someone needing to do a left turn, which is the same as we have at County Road 1 and 21 and also at the independent grocers. So that's the gist of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Robert, have you got any comments that you would like to make at this time, either yourself or Mr. Rutter? And then any comments from council?
Mr. Rutter, would you like to speak, or would you like me to say anything at this time?
Go ahead.
And depending on the questions, if council may have, it might be advantageous to get the director of planning involved as well if there's any further comments. Council could certainly direct staff to go to ACOM or whomever to assist in this endeavor. And as the director of planning noted in his comments to Dysart, excuse me, that staff are open to reviewing any possible options beyond the 2 that are in the ACOM study. So there might even be one that Councillor Roberts has just mentioned, that there might be one that we haven't even thought of, or you know, there's smart people out there that if they were given an assignment and to look at that. So we certainly could bring back a report as requested.
I think we're all looking for improvements in our housing circumstances. We desperately need more housing of all sorts, and you know, we all support that, but it's got to be you know, a safe development, something that doesn't impact other residents too adversely. Personally, I think that it might be better to ask AECOM to do the work, given that they've done the initial work for us, rather than having to go to a new consultant and kind of start all over again. But we'll hear comments from other members of council. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to know, so we have, dueling studies, and further to Robert's comments, is it in fact the case that the alternatives weren't thought of by AECOM, or were they just not included because they didn't feel they were viable? And then that would get us back into, dueling traffic studies. And then what will we do about that? So as I said earlier, I can mentally picture the intersection, but I'm just not intimately familiar with it, because I don't, to be honest, I think I've driven on Wallings Road once in my life. I mean, I need to see a picture and the options, but I would be very concerned about getting into dueling consulting firms who may have different ideas, because then it becomes a subjective decision by council when we already requested a study. So those are my thoughts.
I don't know whether it might be an idea for everyone to take a little tootle around Wallings Way, to just have a look and see, what some of the and Hallbeam and look and see what some of the constraints are. It's a pretty seriously constrained road, and I think we need to consider the fact that this is likely not the only development that's going to be proposed for that road, given that the MNRF property is rife for development. Councillor Kennedy, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. There's one other sentence in the AECOM report that is very concerning. As you just mentioned about the size and the width of the current Wallings Road, is that in both closure options, Wallings Road would be reconstructed to current standards and a new connecting road between Wallings. So that, my understanding is, there is not enough room to widen the current Wallings Road. Right now, I believe the snowplow puts snow in one residence's front door, and if he has it open, it goes in the living room. So there's absolutely no room there for expansion without expropriation. So that's another concern that would have to be considered with the AECOM study as presented. So just for council's attention, very narrow street, suitable for one-way traffic, in my opinion. But I'm not an engineer.
So go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Yes, and that's the whole key. None of us are engineers, so yes, we can drive through to familiarize ourselves with the area, and I obviously am very familiar with the area and have driven in and out of there. But that said, Robert's hands are tied by a study, and yes, Dicer undertook a year ago our own study, and I would totally respect that. Our study only showed ways to mitigate risk, and the county is not willing to mitigate risk. They want to eliminate risk, and therefore the specific questions that I would want to be posed to traffic engineer professionals. Also, there is an addendum to our own report, Schedule A, and I'm not sure if this was written by our previous Director of Public Works. It's updated of October 2019, and it does reference a partial closure of Wallings Road at County Road 21 brackets inbound traffic only, and a new connecting road to Haliburton Crescent, construct driveway access for Haliburton bus lanes to Haliburton Crescent. Whether that part, but it does reference an inbound only alternative. And then as a fourth bullet, it says, if no further development, so I don't understand this, but it says redesign of the intersection of Wallings Road. But that's if the no development option. Well, if it's possible to redesign the intersection of Wallings and County Road 21, why wouldn't that be triggered if there's development? That's all I'm asking. We don't have 20 meters to cut into road into Dicer property that we have designated for housing. And Jody Curry, like I say, in her delegation yesterday, was very clear about that. The project will fail. It's not viable.
If there has to be a 20-meter right away. Councillor Moffat and then Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, I mean, this is top of mind for Dysart, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but it kind of sounds like that Gary Larson cartoon, like blah 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 ginger. You know, um, I haven't looked at the county study in a number of years. And sorry, Andrea, I see your face. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but we got an email yesterday asking for this. But you guys are living in this world. I haven't seen the study in 2 years. I didn't know there was a 2019 update. I haven't seen your study. So I think there's no point, in my opinion, of having any discussion about it today, because I don't know what you're talking about, because I got the email and read it yesterday afternoon. So I think we just need to go straight to whether or not we need housing and we need safety. Do we revisit in order to get that? If yes, who's paying for it? And let's move ahead and get safe access to more housing.
Councillor DeVolen, then Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I have no problem revisiting it until we have a report in front of us with relevant information. To me, the discussion is a wasted exercise.
Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Shell.
And I so appreciate that. And that is what all that I was expecting today. I'm only providing background, let you know the dilemma that both Councillor Kennedy and myself have been in trying to make this work. Therefore, rationale for bringing it forward so that at a future date with direction to staff, we can discuss it at this table. Right now, we've been discussing it at Dysart table for 15 months. And I really appreciate that opportunity. So we don't need to discuss. I was really just merely providing some background. So thank you.
Councillor Shell.
I think it's all been said, but yeah, seeing as how I wasn't sitting at the county table in 2017, I would definitely like to see the history of it, which I mean, I've read about it in the paper and stuff, but a little bit more in depth would be wonderful for those of us who weren't there.
Councillor Royale.
I echo Councillor Shell. It sounds great. I have no information, want to know more. So that's what.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we're looking for something, a report coming back from staff. I'm assuming that would be from both a consolidated report from Roads and Planning about the best approach going forward for us. So we'll look forward to that at our next meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I have a motion if you would.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the November 9th, 2021 correspondence from Councillor Roberts on behalf of the municipality of Dysart et al. And that staff be directed to bring a report to an upcoming council meeting detailing how a review of alternative traffic control options for the intersection of County Road 21 and Wallings Road in the village of Haliburton could be undertaken.
Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roberts and Councillor DeVolen. Any further comment before we vote? You had your hand up? Okay. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Nothing under emergency medical services.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. So next up is finance. Would our Director of Corporate Services be joining us? Or, yeah, okay. Good morning, Andrea.
The first report we have is our check register for October. Our accounts payable for October totaled $1,538,031.85.
Are there any questions on the check register? Could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the check register? Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Burton.
By Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the staff report on the check register for October 2021, And further, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the check register for October 2021 with checks, EFTs, and PAPs totaling $1,538,031.85 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. And next is the payroll register.
We had 2 pays in October totaling $463,614.60.
Any questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder for the payroll register, please? Councillor Shell and Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the staff report on the payroll register for October 2021. And further, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the payroll register for October 2021 with net direct deposits totaling $463,614.60 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And now we have the IT status report. Good morning, Mr. March.
Morning, Warren Danielson and members of the committee. So this is just my standard IT status report outlining the number of tickets we've dealt with in the past month, as well as status of projects that IT is currently working on. Just wanted to bring to the committee's attention one of the projects, and that's a cybersecurity maturity assessment. This was a budgeted project for 2021, and working with the IT working group, we'll be undertaking this very shortly, and I'm hopeful to bring back a report to council in the first quarter of the new year.
Are there any questions for Mr. March? Anything else you wanted to add?
Myself, no, that would be about it.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the IT status report? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Roberts. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that the Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the November 10th, 2021 IT Department Status Report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, we have nothing under planning and environment today. Nothing under personnel here. So next up is tourism. And who is handling tourism for us today?
Well, I will be doing the staff report, but we will bring in our new Director of Economic Development and Tourism. I've been with us now for 5 days. So we'll bring him in and introduce him to council. So I'd like to introduce, a number of you have met already, but Scott Obel, our new Director of Economic Development and Tourism. As I said, Scott has been here for 5 days, so we expect fulsome report today on his activity. No, I'm just kidding. He's been a great addition. I'm really excited about what he's going to bring to the community, and I know he's in the process of reaching out to all of you to meet and get some background and an idea of council's expectations. He'll do that first and then reach out into the community. So it's, I guess, nothing other than to say welcome, Scott, and we really look forward to working with you.
Welcome, Scott. We're certainly glad to have you on board. Absolutely no question about it.
Thank you, Gordon, and look forward to touching base with yourself and the committee members and council members, and start the process and begin the journey together, and look forward to working with the county and the team here. So thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. We're looking forward to some really exciting changes. Just as a note, hopefully you heard the comments about signage and, sort of a cooperation between tourism and roads on where we might go with signage.
I did, and that was actually a wayfinding strategy. Was the last project I completed actually at the town of Huntsville. So something I'm very familiar with, and in my conversations with when I get to know each and every one of you, I'm sure it'll come up and we can chat about that in a bit more detail about the process that entails.
Sounds great. Thank you. So I understand that you have some cover options for us for the Haliburton Highlands.
We do. So I have summoned all of my creative skills and energies and created this, Mike March is going to share some options that our tourism staff have come up with our partners at the Highlander. I don't know what has happened. Bear with us. So we have a number of different, I think there are 2 or 3 different options and at different angles. So we'll just work through, we'll get Mike to scroll down. You'll see the difference between same pictures, but black or white background. And then if we move down, you'll see that it is on an angle, sort of, again, same pictures, different look with the angled pictures. And I think there's another in black. So typically council or committee have provided direction on sort of whether you like the pictures or not, whether you like the photography, whether you like the cover, which of the options you prefer. And so I would ask for your input.
Personally, I like the black background and the straight up, not on an angle, but let's hear what council's got to say. I see first Councillor Roberts, then Burton, then Shell.
I'm gonna unmute. I kind of like on the angle. It's a little bit trendy. A lot of people do the sort of that selfie things on an angle. I don't know why. I don't know what the purpose of it is, but either way, I like the black background, and so I go with either the straight up and down or this angle. But I like this one we're looking at right now.
Councillor Burton.
I as well like the black. I'm actually quite impressed with it, and I do like the angle of the picture.
Councillor Shell.
I like the black background as well, but I do not like the crooked picture because that's just how my brain is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're tied at angle or not angle, so and that's sounding like we like the black background. Councillor Moffat, then Councillor Real.
I won't get you any farther ahead because I like the black background, but I like straight up or angled.
Straight up?
Oh, I like them both. Black. I choose the black background, and I'm not bothered by either straight up or angled.
Okay, it cease.
I've got no problem with the black background, and I guess I'm a little cockeyed, so I like the angled one.
Well, we still need to hear from Brent and Pat.
The black's fine, and I'm indifferent to the orientation. I can see benefits both ways.
Pat.
Yeah, could you bring up number 2 again, the black with the straight? I like the black, and it makes no difference to me. I just like the black background, and whichever one. I don't know if you know how you're going to do this, Madam Warden, but that's what you get the big bucks for.
Councillor Roberts, then Shell.
I think we should ask Scott. What does he think? It's a vote. He could be the tying vote. Go, Scott.
Well, we're obviously agreed on a black background, and we're kind of there's a mix on the whether it should be straight or on an angle. What do you think, Scott?
Scott, I just want to warn you, this is a trap.
We're going to blame you.
It's your first test.
I'm inclined to say I would support whatever council's decision is.
Oh, good man.
And I would probably leave it at that.
Councillor Shell.
My concern with when it's on the angle like that, I mean, and it's hard to tell because we're just looking at it on the screen, but to me, it looks like when it's on the angle, it was like our printing was messed up when it was put through and it's gone cockeyed. To me, it doesn't look like it's something that's intentional to catch the eye. To me, it looks like a printing error. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who is a little bit, I really fussy about crooked pictures. I'm forever straightening them on the wall. I like the straight up and down look, but we are, I think, split right down the middle on angled or not. Carol and then Andrea.
Great.
Straight. Okay, Andrea.
Yeah, same, because we were indifferent. I just like the black background, so straight it is.
Okay, there you have it. Black background, straight up and down. Looks good.
Okay.
Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Burton. Thank you.
First, before I read the resolution, I just want to say Eric Casper has been incredibly supportive through the whole guide development, and I know he has worked closely with the Highlander. Eric works so much behind the scenes, and you know, those people never get recognized enough. So Eric has done a fantastic job with this from start to finish.
Well, if you could pass on our behalf that we really do appreciate his work, and we know that he's been, you know, he's had to take on an extra load in the last little while, and that's appreciated.
Absolutely. Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives the November 10th, 2022 Explore My Haliburton Highlands Cover Options Staff Report, and that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommends to Haliburton County Council that cover option 3 be selected for the 2022 Explore My Haliburton Highlands tourism publication, and that staff be directed to move forward with print production.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Well, next is a discussion item about whether or not or when we would move to in-person council meetings, and hear what your thoughts are on that. Mike, did you have some comments that you wanted to make?
No, I would say that Councillor Shell brought up the issue of masking at the last meeting, and I followed up with the health unit, and I got an interesting answer. They indicated that masks would be required if we were in a council chambers. Having said that, it seems odd to me because I've watched the City of Kawartha Lakes Council on my own time, but they are in the council chambers and they are not masked. They maintain distance, but they are not masked, and that is in the same health unit jurisdiction. So I haven't followed up, but the initial answer to Councillor Shell's question was that yes, masks would be required.
Whether everyone's vaccinated or not.
Yeah, it didn't seem to, what was sent to me didn't really differentiate.
Well, I have some concerns about that. I mean, for starters, it's very hard for people to hear what we would be saying, and we're going to continue to publicize our meetings. That poses a problem for me, and it seems like overkill. But thoughts from council, please. Councillor DeVolen.
I'm in supportive of in-person as soon as possible, but I share the view of the City of Kawartha Lakes and would like to explore that further. I think that if we can maintain a distance and those sort of things, we're all sitting in places that we're eating these days and doing it without masks. I don't see what the difference is, and I share the views of the City of Kawartha Lakes, and if we can make the move whenever it's deemed appropriate to go down the same road as they are, that's my position.
Councillor Shell, then Councillor Kennedy.
I would say until we can meet without masks, I'm not interested in meeting in person, simply because, like I had made the comment in the last meeting, when you have a mask on and you're sitting, you know, on a screen, it's going to be very difficult for people who watch it online to understand or possibly hear what's being said, because I think a lot of people, if you're looking at a face, you can, it's not lip reading per se, but it kind of is.
Well, it's an accessibility issue. Councillor Kennedy and then Councillor Rail.
Councillor Shells, I definitely support what she's saying, and given the rising case counts in Ontario, I'd like to defer till such time as we can meet without masks. And I'm not sure what the province of Ontario is doing mid-January, if those plans are going to change, but perhaps we take a lead from them, but fully support Councillor Shell's comments.
Councillor Rail.
I support Councillor Shell's comments as well. And as far as I'm concerned, if that does get resolved and we can go without masks, I would like to hold off till at least the first of the year and finish this year the way it is. So that's just my opinion on that. But January sounds like a good time period.
Let's hear from, might as well hear from everyone, from Councillors Moffat, Burton, and Roberts.
Thank you. Yeah, I support what's been said. I think there's tremendous value in getting back together, but not if it's going to be creating any challenges for folks to follow our discussions, because we have some very important discussions ahead in the coming year. And I support what Councillor Ryle said, that we, aim for the new year and see how it plays out. That works for me.
Councillor Burton.
And I totally agree with what Carol just said and what Cesar said and with what Lisa has said, that it makes nothing but sense to me.
Andrea.
Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Roberts.
It's okay. Mike referred to the City of Forth Lakes that they are meeting. Obviously, their council chambers are such that, and maybe their video recording is such that they're able to be 6 feet apart. All of, I believe, their council of 9, right? 8 and Warden. How, like, if they're able to, so if you're able to be 6 feet apart, maybe in the county council chamber we can do it. I know I've been talking internally with staff. Desert Council has not talked about this, but we can't do that in our size of our chambers with 7 people. So we are definitely calling it is that when we can sit closer together and not need a mask is probably when we'll go reconvene to in-person meetings, because we can't fit. So I don't know that, have we measured the county council chamber and see if we're able to space our chairs that far apart?
I'm sure that there is sufficient room in our council chambers, as long as we're not adding members of the public, which obviously we wouldn't be doing for now. So I'm hearing that we want to defer this for now until we resolve the issue of masks. So could we put this discussion back on the agenda in December, just to sort of reevaluate where we're at and whether there's been any changes in case counts and provincial direction, which seems to change fairly regularly? That sound reasonable? Councillor Moffat?
I agree. I think we just need to be attentive to what's happening with provincial and health unit direction, because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect there, and just keep revisiting it so we can get back together as soon as is deemed possible.
Councillor Shell?
Let's just follow then what the provincial rules are, and council members can just eat and drink the whole time while we're in the meeting. Nobody has to wear a mask.
Okay. Councillor Rudder, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, we can certainly supply cinnamon buns. I know that those are that's not a problem at all. I guess I was hoping to add another item to the discussion if I could. I apologize, I neglected to include this on the agenda, but we had talked about delegations at the Roma conference, and we were going to circle back and see. We had talked about the possibility of the Crown land conversation, but we were going to circle back and see if there were other issues you wanted to address at Roma.
Any comments on that? Councillor Moffat.
So is the Crown land issue still on, or is that to be discussed? Because there is.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to would like to make that delegation request for Roma as a backup plan. I intend to reach out to the ministry again. They've had, I believe, their change of secondment, and but we can always cancel it, but you can't get another one. You can't get it later. So I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it. And if we have to cancel it, we can.
Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Moffat. Both Algonquin Highlands and Minden Hills has a number of issues. To have that delegation there would be helpful.
So any other delegations that that anyone thinks might be burning issues at the moment? Sounds like we don't have anything else. So that's a big enough one in itself. So we can make that request then?
Yeah, I have a motion to that effect if we could.
Okay, just before we go on, with respect to our discussion on in-person meetings, one of the things that I was going to say earlier was, where are we at with the vaccination, the mandate policy? And maybe we need to tie those two things together. Would that be coming to our council meeting?
Yeah, the draft policy will come forward to the November 24th council meeting.
Okay, so that may help us, further discussions. Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder for the resolution on Roma delegations? Councillors DeVolen and Moffat, thanks.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole direct staff to request delegations from the following ministries. MNRF, re inappropriate use of Crown lands.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you for bringing that up. So we now move into closed session. Does council wish to have a brief break before we move into closed, or are we good to go? We're good to go. All right. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to move into closed? Councillors Roberts and Burton, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole enter into closed session for the following reasons: personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
All in favor? That's carried. And we'll just be a couple of minutes switching over.
And we're back live, Warden Danielson.
Thank you. So next we move into our first budget presentation for next year's budget. Before we get into the individual presentations, I'd just like to say how happy I am to see the starting point that staff has offered us, and to offer my my appreciation on behalf of council for the hard work that's been done by all of our staff to give us a budget that is a lot more reasonable as a starting point than I thought we might be looking at. So we'll move into to our different presentations, unless you've got some introduction remarks, Mr. Rutter.
Yeah, if I might, I'd like to echo your comments and really thank staff for the incredible amount of hard work that they've done to develop this budget. It's always a difficult task, but this year, in times of real transition for staff, we have a lot of new faces around the table, and some new accounting software. that combination of things made this year's work even more challenging. And so, there's a saying that we really burned the midnight oil to put this together. And in this case, I can tell you that I wasn't making these emails or reading them at the time, but I saw an exchange of emails a number of times after midnight. So I want to say that staff worked really, really hard to put this together. And we are really pleased with the final product as a first recommendation to council. We always try to find a balance in the amount of detail that we provide. Our goal is to give you sufficient detail to give you comfort that you're accomplishing your goals with the budget in the upcoming year. We received positive feedback on last year's presentation, and so we really have tried to follow the same format to the extent we can. I say all of that to say there's lots more detail available. If you want it, we'll get it for you. We've given ourselves some time because we are presenting this in October this year. So if you need more detail to get you comfortable, then we are certainly willing to provide it. In some ways, this draft budget tries to respond to a changing community. We've heard council talk a lot about how things have changed, and they really have. This budget is recommending more investments in housing. We continue to see the need for housing of all types, but affordable housing in particular. The demand is going up dramatically. We have more investments as a result of climate change, more investments responding to growth, such as additional staffing in EMS. And council has also is looking to the future with a master plan in that department. And then, of course, economic development as well. In some ways, the draft budget tries to, I guess, progress towards sustainability in key service areas. You're seeing big numbers in this year's budget with respect to bridges that we talked about a year ago at this time with our biannual bridge assessment. And we're seeing that as well in IT and even shoreline preservation. And in some ways, the draft budget tries to incorporate things that have been suggested as part of the service delivery review. Things like economic development and creating a department around that, and procurement. All with the goal to save money in the long term, but in order to do that, we have to make investments in the short term. We've done all of this during a global pandemic, knowing that our community is really struggling. Many of the people in the community are struggling. And so we really have made an effort to mitigate increases where we possibly can and phase them in over time sometimes. Sometimes it's been deferring things. But I can't talk about that without talking about some of the recruitment challenges and retention challenges we're finding as well, and how difficult it is to meet the service demands in a time when, for an example, there was a whole cohort missed in EMS of new recruits because they couldn't write the provincial exam in a timely way. So we're trying to upstaff community paramedicine and upstaff EMS without a cohort of paramedics. And so there are many challenges behind the numbers, and I want to just recognize that we do acknowledge that the community is struggling in many ways. So with that said, I will turn it over to our Director of Corporate Services, who can start with the slide presentation.
Thank you for that, Mike. And welcome, Andrea. And in particular, thanks for your work on this. So take it away.
Definitely was a team effort. Okay, well, thank you, Warden and Council. Staff are pleased to present to you today the first draft of the 2022 budget. Next slide, please. While developing the county's 2022 budget, staff's goals and objectives were to keep tax increases as low as possible, continue to provide efficient service delivery, enhance financial sustainability by focusing on long-term financial planning, an emphasis on zero-based budgeting, while incorporating direction from council with respect to service delivery. Next slide, please. This year's budget process, you're receiving the first draft today. Any updates will continue to come to your regular scheduled committee of the whole meetings until council is ready to adopt. The capital budget presented to you today is based on our asset management plan and capital asset schedule. Any future operational costs related to asset purchases will be incorporated into the budget if expected. Next slide, please. Today's budget presentation process, you'll receive a high-level overview of the county. We will be providing preliminary year-end results for both operating and capital. You will receive the 2022 funding opportunities, challenges, and budget pressures. Each director will be going over their own responsible cost centers. You'll receive a line-by-line highlights to identify any significant change from the 2021 to 2022 budget. And you will also be provided with the 2022 capital budget requests. So to start, we'll do the high-level overview with where we're at right now. Next slide, please. As of October 31st, reports show that we're 78.31% of our operating budget spent, 32.8% of our capital budget spent. We expect to end the year under budget, and this is mainly due to staff vacancies and COVID-related cancellations of training and work projects. At year end, unspent operating will be transferred to working capital reserve or other specified reserves based on council's direction. As mentioned, as of October 31st, 32.8% of capital expenses are spent. Of that, a breakdown of our capital projects, we are 42.2% complete in general government, 28.5% complete in transportation, 74% complete in health, 96.8% complete in library, and 72% complete in planning and development. As the same with operating at year end, any unspent capital will be transferred to reserves based on direction by council. Next slide, please.
If I could just interject for a moment, I'm sorry to do this, but the audio coming out of your office, Andrea, is not good. There's an echo, or some like it sounds like almost a reverberation, and I'm not sure if there's anything that you personally can do about that. I'm not the only one who's having a little bit of trouble with the audio.
Do you have a headset, Andrea?
I don't. I did have, I had some papers on my laptop. Is that, I've moved them now. Does that help at all, or is it still?
Still.
It's still not good.
Actually, Mike March is going to come down and give you a new set.
Okay.
Of headphones. So
sorry about that. No, thanks for stopping me.
Nothing like making our IT guy have to run from one floor to another.
Okay, is that better?
Oh, that's way better. Thanks so much.
Okay, I need to turn you guys down now because that is very loud. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's fine. We can hear you loud and clear now.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So the first draft being provided to you today reflects the staff's understanding of council's expectations combined with departmental planning documents. It utilizes the balances of the modernization and Safe Start funding where we've received direction from council. This draft shows a 3.53% tax rate increase, aided by a 1.01% increase in assessment per MPAC. This is a $956,952 increase over last year's levy, having the 2022 levy currently sitting at $20,878,587. I wonder, oh, I wasn't sure if Mike was back up there yet. Our 2022 funding overall included within the budget is the OMPF funding. It has decreased by $30,800. This will continue to be phased out annually. The OCIF formula-based funding, we have not received confirmation on our 2022 amount as of today. So we have included no change. It is currently sitting in with the amount we received in 2021. Federal gas tax rebate, there will be no change from 2021 to 2022. We have included the $100,000 from the modernization funding intake 3 that council provided direction on for the paramedic service master plan. And we'll continue to apply for funding opportunities as they arise. Some external budget pressures that have been included in this budget are employee benefits. We have not received our renewal amounts as of yet. We are estimating a 5% increase, which equals $32,000. The same for our insurance. We have estimated a 15% increase at a cost of $51,900. Both of those estimates are based on what our increases were for 2021. As previously mentioned, the decrease in OMPF funding. We also are expecting a 5% increase on our health unit contribution, which equals $25,493. And we've also included a $107,000 increase for fuel. Next slide, please. Some of the internal budget pressures that we're seeing is we have added $95,000 for the Affordable Housing Target Program. There are a number of additional new staff included in the 2022 budget, 2 bylaw officers for a period of 10 months at $146,000, a plans examiner for a period of 10 months at $75,000, procurement coordinator, $92,900, and a portion of the Director in Economic Development and Tourism at an increase of $100,000. Torrey Hill upstaff year round. We do have that upstaffed year round in the 2022 budget. January to May is funded by Safe Restart. However, Thanksgiving to the end of the year is an increase of $135,000 to the 2022 budget. We also have included the pay equity market job evaluation review at a cost of just under $180,000, and the increase in service levels at the public libraries of just over $150,000. We continue to build sustainability within our budget. That includes the appropriate transfers to and from reserves. The end of 2021, we estimate that our reserves will be approximately $7,263,000. Within the 2022 budget, we are proposing to transfer $707,000 to reserves, and we are proposing to transfer just over $2.4 million from reserves. Of that 2.4 million, 116,700 is for unspent 2021 projects that are being moved to 2022. 350,000 is for 2 ambulance purchases. Just over 1 million is for roads and bridges projects. And 931,000 is for modernization and safe restart funding of projects. It's estimated that our reserve balance at the end of 2022 will be approximately 5.5 million. 4 million is the targeted minimum balance as per the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. As mentioned, we continue to work towards sustainability within our budgeting, and sustainability has been reached in most areas within the county. Here you'll be able to see the history of our capital projects over the years. If you remember, in 2020 is the year that we got caught up on our roads projects. 2022, 5.5 million of this is structure work, which Robert will speak to in more detail. And I should maybe state here that it's not an increase of, that is our total capital budget. So it wasn't, we're increasing it, but it's a total, not an increase of 10 million. Now I'll go through Division 010, which is our general government cost centers.
Just before you go on, Andrea, just it seems a good point to just take a quick break and ask if anyone has any questions, thoughts, or concerns to this point. Andrea. Sorry, Councillor Roberts.
I'm gonna need a new mouse. I apologize. Back to the OMP, MPAC. Obviously, that's just an estimate of the 1.01% growth, because I don't believe that we know the full number as of yet. And also, just of note, that we all received information that MPAC is freezing the evaluations as at 2016 levels. So it's only new growth. So they're not going to be kicking in the new 4-year cycle until I believe it's 2023. If anyone wants to correct me.
No, that is correct.
Yeah.
We do have access to live numbers, so that 1.01% is a live number. So
okay,
we can count on at least that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warren. Just through to Andrea, if I can. The estimated 15% increase for insurance, I just wondered how you came up with that.
For both the estimates for the employee benefits and insurance, we based it on what our increases were for 2021. So for 2021, it was a 15.74% increase that we received.
Okay, thank you. One more up, Warden, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
With the health unit, 5%. Now that's a little bit high to me, but I just wonder how it came to that one.
I think I'll let Mike speak to that because I believe he received the information on that.
Thank you.
So you'll recall that a couple of years ago, the province changed the funding, I guess the proportionate share of funding for the health units, and the municipalities were required to pay more of their share. The increases in the ministry made a subsequent decision that our increases would be capped at 10%. And you'll recall that council had some concerns about that, asked some additional questions. The Board of Health this year and our new medical officer of health have worked really hard to pare that number down. There was an estimate provided previously that they would be asking for 10%. They've reduced that to 5%, and we'll be continuing conversations to see if they can get that even lower. But 5% is a worst case scenario with our Board of Health. But that is the result of a lot of hard work on their part in very challenging times. So yeah.
Any other questions? Just a couple of comments at this point for me, which may be clarified later on. I am a little bit concerned about the amount of unspent capital funds. I'm also concerned about the insurance. I'm just afraid that basing it, estimating it on last year's increases may not be sufficient. I'm just worried about the insurance companies and, you know, given what we've experienced over the last couple of years, that being higher. I'm also, and this is, I'm like a broken record about this. I'm concerned to see, despite what MACA's targets are for reserves, a substantial reduction in our reserves over the year. Now, I understand that we've got some big projects to do, but that's something that always concerns me.
Could I just speak to that? I think that will become more of what you see in the future because of our sustainability initiatives. So remember that we're trying to get a static number, and years we underspend that number, we transfer that to reserves for those years we spend more. And I think you will see a lot more of that. So as an example, you know, we're putting 200 and some thousand into reserves in EMS and pulling 350 out because it's the year that we're buying an extra ambulance. So we're planning for that, and that is part of the sustainability cycle that we will see moving forward. So I certainly we understand council wants to see our reserves grow, and we take that into account, but the transfers from often are planned and are part of the plan.
Okay, thank you. I guess we can carry on to general government.
Okay. So I'll be covering the following cost centers: accessibility, general administration, MPAC assessment office, council, health professional, recruitment, our debt. And I do need to note here that there is an error on this slide because the budget does include our new debt included in the draft budget is 5.1 million. I apologize that slide didn't get updated appropriately. And also the health unit contributions. Accessibility is expected to end 2021 under budget by approximately $6,000. Accessibility document training was provided to county and local staff as per the joint accessibility plan. That was a cost of approximately $5,500 to be invoiced this month. General administration is expected to end 2021 under budget. Our actual revenues are higher than expected due to receiving phase 2 of Safe Restart funding, and our expenses lower than expected due to staff vacancies and unutilized training, mileage, and health and safety expenses. MPAC Assessment Office is expected to end 2021 on budget. Council is expected to end 2021 on budget. We have utilized unspent training budget for extra wages and per diems for this year. Health professional recruitment, we are expected to end 2021 under budget by approximately $20,000. Any unspent funds will be recommended to be transferred to reserve for future related health professional recruitment initiatives. Our contribution to the health unit is expected to end 2021 on budget also. We had one capital project for general administration this year, and that was the implementation of our Diamond financial software. It will not be fully implemented by the end of 2021 and will be carried over into 2022. This project was and continues to be fully funded by the modernization funding. 2022 funding, finance continues to look for capital funding opportunities for our bridge projects and are seeking grants to support our economic development and climate change initiatives. Finance continues to look for new funding opportunities for all departments and assist them with completing their applications. The 2022 budget includes 2 capital projects for general administration. The one is the completion of the Diamond financial software, and the second is the implementation of electronic records management system. Both of these are funded by modernization funding. Go through and do line by line highlights for the 2022 budget. First is accessibility, and which can be found on page 2 of your binders. There is no major changes within this budget. We do plan to complete the AAC board project, which was originally scheduled for 2020, but unfortunately has been postponed due to COVID. Highlights under the general administration budget, which can be found on page 3. As previously mentioned, the decrease in the OMPF funding of $30,800. We have a decrease in our transfer from reserve of $64,649. We have a decrease of $100,000 in our transfer to reserve, which can be found on page 4. An increase in our wages and benefits, like $225,000. Again, this is due to new position, benefit increases, and our pay equity review. Our insurance increase of 15%, that equals approximately $10,000 for the general administration cost center. Our training found on page 5 is a decrease of just over $60,000. That's due to removing the lean training, which was budgeted in 2021 for $60,000. The health and safety line has increased $8,400. That does have $5,100 coming from reserves to fund that, and that's due to training from 2020 and 2021 that has had to been pushed because of COVID and is now in the 2022 budget. Our professional services contracted line has decreased by $39,000. In 2021, we budgeted for integrity commissioner, which we having to use the integrity commissioner, which we did not use. So I will be bringing a report forward to recommend moving that amount to reserve and not budget for that in 2022. And finally, on page 6 is the increase to our purchases software of $30,000, and that is for the 2 capital projects I previously mentioned.
I wonder, just a question about the removing the amount for the integrity commissioner, if we should be removing that completely or leaving a small fund there just in case?
Actually, that does leave a small, my recollection is $10,000 or $15,000.
Okay.
And then if it's a large investigation, we could draw on that reserve, that the 39 or the money that will be transferred to reserves.
Okay, thanks for that.
Council, which can be found on page 12. There is a decrease in the transfer from reserve and the transfer to others of $35,000. And that is the removal of the $10,000 that was paid to EOWC contribution and the $25,000 contribution to student internet in the 2021 budget. Health professional recruitment can be found on page 16. Changes to this budget, we are now, we do have a rental unit there now, so we are now receiving and paying rent. So you will see an increase of $30,000 in the revenue rental line and an increase in the expense rent line of $36,000. We have also decreased the other line of this by $11,500, and that was to right size that budget.
Any questions there? Okay, carry on.
Right. Highlights for our debt for 2022. On page 100, you'll find the debt, the $3 million debt that previously. That transfer from reserve, has decreased by $100,000. And that is, so we don't have that in 2022 to assist with our payments. On page 101 is where you would find the new debt expense, and that is a total of $365,000 for 2022. Our contribution from the health unit, as previously stated, has increased by 5%, which equals $25,493. The health unit has offered to come and do a presentation for council on our contributions, if that is something that council would like to take them up on.
Is that something council would be interested in hearing? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, then we'll move into Division 060, Social Services. This division has two cost centers, social housing and social services. Both are expected to end 2021 on budget. An update on the 2021 capital. We did pay $252,000 to City of Kawartha Lakes this year for the Whispering Pines Phase 2 project. Budget pressures for 060 is the continued uncertainty around funding and service levels. In the draft budget that we did receive from the City of Kawartha Lakes, we are seeing a 3.6% increase in the housing budget and a 1.4% decrease in the social services budget. Capital for social housing, which can be found on page 116, $198,284 is budgeted for capital projects in 2022. We are also scheduled to transfer $360,000 to the City of Kawartha Lakes for the Highway 35 development project. Half of this payment was budgeted for in 2021 and is in reserves. So we have the other half included in the 2022 budget. And also, as previously mentioned, we have increased the Affordable Housing Target Program by $95,000.
Question from Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, the 95,000 affordable housing target. What's the intent of those funds to be used for?
Well, we have the Affordable Housing Target Program that provides a number of different financial incentives, and that can include anything from $12,000 per unit for the Highway 35 development. But it's not just 95. It's I think it's in excess of 275. I can't remember the exact number. Andrea might be able to help me with that.
I think this is the additional. It was the 180 plus the 95.
Okay, so about 275,000 is in there. 180 of that will go towards funding half of the Highway 35 development, and the balance will fund the Affordable Housing Targets Program, which can be anything. You know, it's all of the financial incentives related to the development of affordable housing. That can be a per unit. I know that we are looking at bringing a report forward in the very near future to talk about ways we can change the financial incentive program and maybe provide some more support for developments as well.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just thank you for that, Mike and Andrea, for the clarification. Yeah, it's an increasing problem for the lower tiers as we move into these housing projects. The offsetting cost requests that are coming from the proponents to support county initiatives, and the ability to pay is becoming a problem. A recent application we have is to help offset costs for sewer hookup fees, and that currently that the county doesn't really provide funding for that because it's not a City of Kawartha housing total initiative. So I just like county council to be aware that I think that we have to have a look at that in the future as to where we're going to go with supporting our lower tiers as we move towards, and there's going to be lots of housing incentives, I'm sure, coming forward, but it is an issue.
Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Councillor Kennedy. I think of the two lovely units we have by the community center that putting the road in and the services, Minden Hills on their own, the number, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, was about 300,000 that we shouldered, plus the price of the property, which at today's values is worth a chunk of money. And I get it. It certainly needs to be part of the discussion and go forward how and where those costs may fall.
Yeah, and again, I think staff met with City of Kawartha Lake staff, I can't remember when, month and a half ago or so, and to help, because I know county council and the local councils have said we would really like policies to lead these discussions as opposed to ad hoc requests. And so that is our goal, to put something together that way. I think the servicing is an interesting one because, you know, we've often heard from you know, the smaller municipalities that don't have services would like some housing as well. And so we need to find a way, and we think that may be one way we can help make sure that some of that housing gets developed in the communities without housing or without services. And so we will be bringing forward a report shortly with some changes in that way, but with really two goals: to help those with services, but also to help those without.
Great news. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be great to get that report. I know that you know, the Housing Corporation coming to us and saying, you know, here are the opportunities and here are the tools that you have to use. Well, you know, that it was my understanding that that's optional for each of the municipalities to determine whether they want to go ahead with that or not. But it's a little tougher, you know, than it sounds. Here's your toolkit. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to hear that too, because I'm sure every budget time I put the placeholder in for the reminder that certainly Algonquin Highlands has never received the benefit of any county dollars toward this, but the need is still there. Algonquin Highlands has the greatest growth in the township or in the county, but we don't have services, and so that finding a way to provide for those services in communities like ours is really important. So I look forward to that, and I'll cross that reminder off my list.
Put it on your bring forward list. Don't cross it off. Okay, any other comments at this point? Councillor Roberts.
Okay, thank you. So it's not on this issue. It's just actually regarding the property of We Care. Is this in this budget? And I tried to look at the line by line and couldn't see anything. And I just wondered if this is, I would think it's included in here or no?
In terms of,
Yeah. Well, I suppose just wondering our own debt payment and revenue in, and any upgrades that we were wanting to make. I think some we were doing through modernization. So just curious, I guess, a little bit about were there other needs required there? If it's now our building, you know, roof, windows, bathrooms, carpet, I don't know, stuff.
So we did fix the roof either last year or the year before. I'm not sure. Robert will talk a little bit about. We do need to have conversations with our daycare, with the daycare providers who are our tenants in our two daycare buildings. So we will have those conversations this year. The We Care property, the debt repayment is being made as county council directed. So that is included in this budget with some interest as well. So we're repaying ourselves that. The We Care property itself had other potential, and county council will recall that you have given direction to us to do a bit of a master planning exercise for that property to make sure that it is developed to its highest and best use. We are with the change in staff, we're behind on that project. But I will say the new executive director, I believe, is the title at Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Housing Corporation, has a background in development, and so we've had some preliminary conversations with her about working with her to come up with a plan for housing, recognizing that anything that happens there would need to complement the daycare operation that was there first. So that conversation hopefully will advance, and we'll be back to County Council with some suggestions on how we might move forward, hopefully in 2022.
Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I was more just checking in to see, I mean, I know there's the two, but the one has just been fully renovated. So wasn't thinking about that, but the other is an older building, and just didn't know if there was more repair or maintenance needed, to get it up to where it needs to be. So I just didn't know more specifically on the building, not the property, but that's good to hear that you're thinking about that as well.
Yeah, nothing has been included in the budget other than, our typical maintenance budget, but we are going to have a conversation with the operators of We Care to see what is required.
Okay, I guess we can carry on.
Okay, so I will pass it on to the Director of IT.
Thank you, Andrea.
Hello again, Warren Danielson and members of the committee. Please bear with me as I get the presentation up on the screen.
Would it be possible for you to run downstairs and get a headset, Mike, just to
That should be fine. Okay, thank you for waiting. So today I'll be going through the IT budget recommendations for 2022. And as noted on the slide, we'll be looking today at the IT budget as well as the broadband budget. Included in the broadband budget is almost all of the internet service costs for the county and our 4 member municipalities. And about 45% of the total internet costs for our member municipalities facilities are covered by the county in this budget. And then we charge back for the remaining 55%. And included in the IT budget are hardware replacements, including computers for all of our departments, excluding EMS and the library. We also have the iCompass agenda solution in this budget. All of the voice over IP and analog phone costs for all of our departments, again, excluding EMS, are in this budget. Accessible document software for all of our staff. And also included is licensing that benefits all of our municipalities, such as our backup recovery solution and software patch management. So both broadband and IT budgets are expected to come in budget for 2021. So in 2022, the IT department purchased a replacement firewall for our main data center here at the county main office. We upgraded storage capacity on our 2 servers, as well as completed the scheduled replacement of 6 staff computers. I am recommending that we defer the replacement of our Public Works copier to 2022 and purchase it along with the administration copier, which is due for replacement next year. Public Works copier is in decent condition, so it should be fine to wait till 2022. And I'm expecting the IT capital budget to come in slightly over budget this year, and this is due to a 2021 capital purchase that was delayed and wasn't billed until 2022.
I think, is it possible you're a year ahead, a 2020 capital purchase that was billed in 2021?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, that's the 2020 purchase that wasn't billed in 2021. No funding opportunities are expected in 2022. So a little bit about 2022 budget pressures. In the broadband budget, the majority of our expenses are on long-term contracts. So the operating costs for IT are similar to 2021. There is a recommendation to remove the $140,000 we typically budget for broadband projects, as the province now appears to be spearheading these initiatives for the foreseeable future with no municipal contribution required. And for council's note, there is currently $275,000 sitting in a reserve should a future project be identified and approved. As for IT, we're currently sitting at a 20% increase over 2021. This is primarily related to increases in salary and benefits. Included in that salary and benefit increase is 1/3 of the cost of our third IT technician position, which is about $32,000. That's currently being fully funded through Safe Restart. We're recommending building in that 1/3 cost into the budget to soften the impact in future years when that position will no longer be funded through Safe Restart. Also included in this increase was a pre-approved salary adjustment for our IT technician positions due to the challenges we encountered in recruitment and retention of staff in that role.
Just one comment about that sheet. I'm wondering about removing the $140,000 from the broadband budget. Recognizing that there is funding in reserves, I'm still wondering if we shouldn't be leaving that contribution in the budget in case there are opportunities that come up that are outside of the work that the province is doing that we might decide that we want to take advantage of. I'm sure you gentlemen have discussed that, but I'd just like to hear thoughts about that.
From us or council?
Both.
Okay. Well, I can start. I think that the reverse auction process that the province has identified would, it really doesn't have any, it doesn't include EORN, which that's where we have typically funneled those dollars. When we looked last year, we saw that it was, when we hired Jonathan Black, I guess the challenge was just so monumental that it was really challenging for us. Our money just wouldn't go very far at all when we needed $55 million to fix the problem across the county to do 5010 or 120 million plus to do gigabyte service. So I guess in a really challenging budget year, we talked about it and thought, that it's really a drop in the bucket given the challenges and the fact that the province has a plan that doesn't include a municipal contribution. We would just be really collecting the money to put it into reserves and sit there. So we thought it would be best to just, knowing that we had $275,000 in reserves, if we did have a project come up, we could utilize that while we waited for another budget year to increase that amount. But it's certainly, it is an evolving space. There's no question about that. And we don't know what the future holds. So I guess that would be the reasoning for the recommendation, but happy to hear what council has to say.
Thoughts on that, Councillor DeVolen?
I don't see any scenario from where I sit today that we would be spending money in these initiatives in the 2022 calendar year. There's a number of things that kind of have to, in my mind, flow through for us to get a notion of it. And, it's the concept of just generally reserves being higher. I think a little over $250,000 there for another year, so that there might be something, and we decide that you might want an increase, and that'll be with the new council, obviously, as well, to those reserves. But I don't see in the 2022 year anything that's on the horizon for us. Having said that I don't want to be misunderstood by the public. The mobile broadband project that's going forward, and there are a number of other initiatives from the biggies, Bell and Rogers, but obviously North Frontenac. Things are continuing to go ahead, but it doesn't appear that there's a specific one for us at the county level to lean into next year.
Did I see another hand up about this or no? Okay. All right, carry on, Mike. Thanks.
The IT budget, a little note about budget sustainability. We have a 10-year sustainability forecast for all our capital expenses built into the IT budget. And again, as mentioned before, as we're on long-term contracts for internet services, there are no major increases expected in the next 5 years. We'll note about recommended capital projects for 2022. The big one is the scheduled replacement for our 2 data center servers. These are the 2 physical servers that are used by the county and all 4 of our member municipalities. And just a note, council, the 2 servers that were decommissioned, they're typically either turned into lab servers for testing or spares that we keep on site in case we have a major hardware fault with either of our 2 main servers. I'm also recommending that, I'm also recommending the scheduled replacement of the county's core networking switch, 5 computers, and as mentioned before, the public works and administration copiers. So as alluded to earlier, we've taken all of the line items with the highest increase or decrease and put them on this slide. I've put in the page numbers for each if council should wish to refer to them in the budget binders. I'll just go over each now, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me. So the first line is increase to the municipal funding total. So this typically will increase or decrease depending upon what projects we're undertaking, as this line item includes chargebacks to our member municipalities. The transfer to and from reserve line items, they typically include the dollar amount needed to hit our sustainability number, depending on whether or not the actual costs for the year are above or below that sustainable target amount. So this year in the transfer from reserve, it includes an increase to meet our sustainability number this year due to the expense of the 2 servers that we're purchasing, as well as the costs of the deferred public works copier. While in 2021, we had a transfer to reserve line item to meet our sustainability number. This year we do not. However, we have included the 1/3 costing for 3rd IT technician that I mentioned earlier, which results in an increase of about $18,000. We have approximately the $86,000 increase in the wages and benefits. Again, as mentioned previously, included in that is the pre-approved salary adjustment for our 3 IT technicians and the benefit increases alluded to by the Director of Corporate Services. We have an increase in software licensing of about $8,600. However, the bulk of that is actually going to be recoverable through chargebacks to our municipalities. We have an increase to the capital hardware budget, again, due to the new servers being purchased. And we have a decrease in our capital software budget, primarily due to less licensing upgrades required in 2022. The bottom 2 line items come from our broadband budget. And we have the decrease in the transfer to reserve. That's per the recommendation to $140,000 for broadband initiatives. And we have a decrease in our investment income line. So that concludes the IT portion of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mike? Councillor Dvolan?
Just a quick one that doesn't relate specifically to this, but I remember, Mike, a year or 2 ago with respect to servers, and we were considering or entertaining any cloud opportunities that we may avail ourselves of. That has that kind of changed, or we're kind of the status quo in terms of what we're doing on our own services, our own servers vis-a-vis doing stuff in the cloud, kind of just where we're at with that issue.
Through the warden, yeah, we're definitely starting to make the transition of some of our services into the cloud. Big initiative that we started this year, and that will be going into next year, is a migration of probably about 1/3 of our staff to the Microsoft 365 platform, which will be moving our email service in the cloud, kind of for councillors, CAOs, some key personnel that would be involved in emergency management. We thought that extra security and redundancy of having those accounts in the cloud and getting that better uptime sounded like a good idea. So that's one of the big initiatives we have moving to the cloud. And we do have some services in, and we keep looking at and investigating cloud options whenever we're looking at new software solutions. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Any other questions on IT? Okay, thank you, Mr. March.
Thank you.
Next up is Public Works. Hello again, Robert.
Hello again, Warden.
So go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Further to what Mr. Rutter mentioned, we're just following the same format that was provided to council in January of this year. And so again, if there's any further detail that's required, it's very high level. And I've noticed that the former director rolled up a lot of numbers once we get to the line by line. So it could be confusing. So again, we could provide further information if required, but there's pretty much some minor changes, and we can certainly address and talk to the significant ones. So next slide, please. And maybe to address, Warden, you had a concern earlier about the unspent capital funds, and quite a valid concern. A lot of our work is and was completed late this year, so those bills and invoices are in process and will be coming. So I guess a good news story is that we will be spending most of the money, and on the good news side, we will be under budget. So it's some highlights of what we've spent this year. We've spent on about 5 kilometers of hot mix paving, the surface treatment, about 27 kilometers of road. We rejuvenated about 6 kilometers of road. We crack sealed about 6.7 kilometers. Now with the crack sealing, we didn't do as much as envisioned in the budget on the distance. We did spend the amount. If anybody has been on County Road 7 north of West Guildford, they noticed how much crack sealing we did. So that's a per meter price. So there was a lot of crack sealing done. So we're looking at various treatments for next year to add to our program on what treatments we'll do in certain sections. We do have a picture here that Eagle Lake was finally completed. You can see there's no signals there, so both lanes are open. So I think that's welcome in the neighborhood. The Fishtail Creek culvert replacement went very well, and that's completed and opened. We also were able to replace guide rails, so safety improvements at Essen Lake Culvert. The Furnace Falls Bridge was brought forward into this year, as well as we resurfaced the Horseshoe Lake Bridge. So those are some of the key projects that were completed, both on the roads and the structures side of things. And on the hot mix, on the surface treatment, we did have County Road 19 that was, council did give approval for 3 additional roads to be completed this year. However, we did run out of time, as discussed earlier today in our status report, and that's now being added into the 2022 program that's we'll talk about further. Next slide, please. So with respect to our fleet, we have here again, slightly under budget on all of our expenditures and purchases once we actually receive them. As we mentioned earlier today, the Great Hall was getting picked up today. We've also heard that the tandem plow should be available mid-December, and our pickup truck should be available hopefully early December. We're not quite sure on the 1 ton. It might be early next year when we get that. So both with the expenditures being slightly under budget, we've also had some revenues that are in excess of our previous estimates when we do our auctioning on gov deals. So I guess good news on both fronts there for fleet. Next slide, please. And then this slide deals with a summary of kind of our maintenance activities. The winter maintenance expenditures to date, and that's just the cost for materials, is about $367,000 out of a budget of $825,000. That's to the end of October. Hopefully, if the weather continues like this, we'll have quite the excess budget. But we'll see what the rest of November and December holds for the weather. As we go down, we have in-house culverts. Those are the culverts that our staff can complete with the type of equipment we have and the roads and the locations and the depths. So we completed about 29 in-house culverts this year. We completed about 20 kilometers of ditching on both sides of the road. The next item is about guide rail posts. That item also includes about $36,000 of steel beam, guide rail, and end treatment repairs. So there's two components to that $80,000. The $170,000 spent on line painting, that's an estimated number. We're working with the contractor right now. I'm not sure if council will recall the big storm in Texas in the spring knocked out a whole bunch of supplies for, in this case, paint. So our contractor invoked force majeure because there was a event that they could not control. So they worked with us. Don't know if council noticed, but they mobilized a number of times to get pavement markings like stop bars and arrows done quickly, and did the rest of the pavement marking later in the season. So we're working with them on settling up that account. The next item is our in-house repairs on the rail trail. So that's staff dealing with washouts and other calls, trees, beavers, etc. The last item might be more appropriate on a capital screen, but we've included it here with the rail trail. We expect to spend about $275,000 on the base repairs and granite screenings. That's contingent on our one contractor finishing this season. However, if they don't finish, then we'll carry that over and make sure it gets done next year. That will just depend on how the weather holds over the next few weeks. We do expect that they should be able to finish, but you never know if the weather turns. So I guess in summary, our maintenance, our capital, we expect to be just under budget on all accounts, very similar to what the Director of Corporate Services mentioned. On the operating side, because of staffing issues, and on the capital side, because of some projects we haven't completed, but we're carrying over into next year. So I guess we can go on to the next slide unless there's any questions on the current year's projects.
Carry on.
Okay, thank you. So for funding for Public Works for 2022, as Director of Corporate Services noted, we've got the OCIF estimated about $283,000, which is the same as last year. The federal gas tax estimated the same as last year. I could mention if there was the provincial update last week, the province is expecting to increase the funding to the OCIF, which we will benefit, and we're keenly looking to find out how that will roll out, if it's just going to be a percentage basis or if there'll be applications that we could put towards a specific bridge or structure. The ICIP rail trail, that's our envisioned carryover for the money to do the signing as well as the accessibility improvements. Next slide, please.
Just one comment on that slide about the federal gas tax. I'm assuming that that we will be having discussions in the upcoming year about the transportation systems, and whether part of that funding would be identified for that.
I can, the federal gas tax, that would be the provincial gas tax.
Oh, okay, sorry.
On that, and yes, we will have a conversation about that.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Now, as for budget pressures, we've got that continued volatility and uncertainty in materials and labor, both the cost and availability, gas, different items like steel, galvanized steel, guide rail, paint. There's significant increases in all areas. We're also dealing with climate change impacts, increasing with the number and intensity of events. We've got the state of our roads, where I think council's on a great path that they started a couple of years ago, looking to promote the preservation and not worse first type of scenario. And as stated by others, we do have short-term significant rehabilitation costs above kind of a desired sustainability threshold. Staff are also dealing with, as we always have, the collaboration with our township partners and the service to delivery review. So that's all part and parcel of what we'll be looking at is how we tender the projects once council approves and any of our recommendations on what we'll be tendering for the coming year. Next slide, please. As the Director of Corporate Services mentioned, the goals and objectives are key for the sustainability. We have the big 4 areas for public works, being roads, structures, buildings, equipment, and maintenance, kind of combined together. The budget numbers that you'll see coming forward, notwithstanding the structures numbers, are all in line with minimal increases, with shifting numbers here and there to try and adjust for realities of the work that's been happening and some of the improvements that have been made, but also some areas that we need to concentrate on more. Next slide, please. Now, this slide should be familiar to council. It's been presented a couple of times, and this is kind of our goal that we can get to structures. This one's showing the 10-year plan that was started back in 2020, where there was that significant investment of almost $6 million to catch up on the roads. And then the bars showing the green and blue with the desire to have more green than blue. The one big change on this diagram here is in 2022. So for next year, we're changing one project that would have been counted as a green, which is our County Road 1 job. We've changed the treatment type because we believe we've missed the window for the preservation type work, and we need to do a resurfacing, but we believe we can do it for the same sort of dollars. I think, and as we go through the plans, what staff are trying to do is there are 10-year plan through our DOT program that we have, but we're working towards funding windows. So each one of those bars has a dollar value attached to it. So as we go through the years, as we brought some roads forward into this year's budget, as council provided the approval for the budget, there's a resorting as roads age differently and there's different deficiencies that become apparent. So staff are trying to keep that, again, that budget funding envelope as our target. And again, the roads will be kind of resorted as we go through. We're collecting data and we hope to rerun kind of that 10-year plan in the next few weeks and months to see what big changes might be in the later years of this program. I guess we can go to the next slide, please.
Well, Liz?
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, question for Robert. I have to remind me, have we set a network goal yet using the DOT software? You talked about 10-year plan, but so is our goal 75 or is it 80 or so it gives you something to work towards?
Right. It's in that 75 range. I am trying to pull pieces apart just with the transition of finding where numbers are from. I'm finding reports because of a number of plans that are there. So excellent point that it is that target. The DOT program allows you to set targets, both either your PCI or your network performance, or how much do you want to spend. And so there's a balance there. And that's what was done a couple of years ago, or back in 2019 when it was originally done. So we're just working on updating those numbers and getting the information. The company that we deal with is very helpful. Just related to the whole fact that the construction season has extended into November, we haven't had the benefit of the time to actually delve into the numbers as sufficiently as we would like to.
Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
My goodness. Okay. Yeah, thanks. So just also alluding to the DOT software, and year over year, what we've been doing it too, and I'm just checking if we're doing it at the county, is that that we are increasing that dollar value that we are contributing. So that's where I'm not sure, looking at that one chart, it sort of just holds steady at just over $3 million, but year over year, are we not increasing that?
Right. What was done is back in 2020, there was a report to council regarding the funding options. And from what I've pieced together, what I believe where we're at is there's a sustainable number of 2.85 million with a 1% growth factor added to that. But there was also, for the first 3 years of the loan, that a third of the loan payments were going to be added to the amount to help offset the loan payments in the first 3 years. So that's why that number was used in the DOT software, and that's where these bars lay out. So you don't see that kind of either a flat line or a transition. We don't have that sustainability number. When we get to the fleet, you'll see that I've drawn a nice straight green line because we have a nice easy number there. This one's a little more challenging just to understand exactly where we are, but these are the numbers that were shown to council back in 2020 and 2019 with the same totals across those years. But again, I continue to delve into just to make sure as we go that I got those numbers right. But I do believe it's the 2.85 million back in 2019 and 2020 plus 1%, and then a third of the loan and interest amount for the first 3 years of the loan. And that's where those numbers are above the 3 million for the first few years, and then it kind of levels off.
Thanks.
That responds to your question? Okay. Carry on then.
Okay, thank you. Now here we have the proposed 2022 road projects. You'll note the first road, County Road 1 from Giza to south of Galert. That's the one that in last year's budget, it would have been down in the bottom part under preservation. We've moved it up for a different treatment type just because of the age of the road and the characteristics of that. So we want to make sure we do the right treatment at the right time. Also under the preservation, you'll note that there's County Road 19. That's the road that we were hoping to do this year. It's being slotted in to next year. We've also brought forward County Road 8 that we believe requires treatment this year. The bottom two numbers, there's miscellaneous that we're looking at candidate sites for crack sealing and rejuvenation. I believe we'll probably end up doing a little bit more rejuvenation than 95,000, a little less crack sealing than 95. Staff, we're just visiting sites right now, and we'll have candidate sites for the December update. Totaling those projects, that's where we get to the first subtotal of 3.556 million. Going back to that chart, the sustainability number for 2022 that's been laid out to council for the last number of years is the 3.316 number. Therefore, staff were proposing to transfer from road reserves about 240,000 of unspent money that we expect from this year. And if there's not quite 240 unspent, the balance to be made up from the existing road reserve to be able to do that work and keep that funding envelope over the number of years to spend on roads as was intended. Would there be any questions on this slide?
One question about the Cushog Road. Maybe I should know the answer to this, but how much of the road does that 6.8 kilometers cover?
Let's see. Well, that's an excellent question. You're asking the new guy on the length of our roads. I certainly can get that answer, but I don't have it at hand.
Okay, it's just that that's one particular road that's under the county's responsibility that I've had a lot of calls about and requests for work to be done.
Right, and there is one section of road. I'm not sure the exact distance, but there's one section of road that we're not doing. So there's kind of the top end and the bottom end with a piece in the middle that's considered in acceptable condition right now. I just don't have the distance at hand.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on that slide? All right.
Next slide, please. And to your question, Warden, you can see on this diagram, here's the map. You can see the part of County Road 11 that's not being done. The lines are estimated, but that shows where the roads that we have currently programmed on the schedule will be adding those crack sealing and rejuvenation to the map for the update in December.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Next slide, please. This is a very, very tentative 2023 road project. Because staff, we've been moving projects in and out. There are a couple of typos on this one whereby the County Road 9 that's shown at the top of the list there, it's already done this year. So we'll be looking for a replacement road for that, which we have roads already in mind, as well as down below at Preservation, County Road 19 shown. Again, that's one that's going to be done next year. So we'll have a few more roads that we're looking to add. Again, that's rerunning the DOT software to incorporate the roads that we have done, and look forward to seeing what we get out for optimized results to get, as Councillor Kennedy mentioned, that kind of a target PCI or network performance of around 75. Next slide, please. Now, here's our structures slide. Now, like I mentioned with roads, we hope to get one of those kind of sustainable lines and a bridge condition index rating on here. So that's our goal for next year. We will be doing the 2022 OSIM study. So I believe over the next year, depending on how council would like to approach the loan option and what structure we do and the results of next year's bridge inspection study, I think we'll be in an excellent position to achieve sustainability, or at least know the number that we need to get to that sustainability number. Next slide, please. So here we have a listing of the proposed 2022 structure projects. Now, these are the near-term projects that were presented to council last December by Keystone Engineering and Harold Claywaite. Again, this I would suggest to council would be, depending on how you frame it, a worst case or a very conservative estimate. We have significant contingencies based in all of these projects because of the volatility of the market and where we are in the design and tendering period. For example, the Drag River Bridge has about a 15% contingency in it, which at over $2 million, that's $300,000 right there that we would hope not to expend. But as we saw with Eagle Lake, that one did go significantly over budget. So structures are a challenging lot when you open them up. They're kind of like those home renovation shows where you open the wall and find out something that you didn't know was there. So the projects that we have listed there, the Drag River Bridge, the Dark Lake Bridge, the York River Bridge, and the Gooderham Bridge all need very similar repairs. They're looking at deck overlays, barrier wall replacement, concrete repairs, etc. The Lower Cup Lake Culvert is footings repairs as well as guide rail. The other bridges would have guide rail upgraded as well. With that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. I was just a little bit surprised why biennial inspections are included in projects rather than just general operations, and we're borrowing money to do them.
We can certainly look to moving it into an operational side. It was just trying to keep structures with structures, and I can discuss that with our Director of Corporate Finances on how we fund that. It is a minor amount. We do envision to do an enhanced inspection this year on a couple structures so that we get that good information for the 2022 report and get that sustainability amount going forward. But very good question, Councillor Kennedy. I'll follow up on that for you. As noted at the bottom, again, kind of a worst case scenario of a loan of approximately $5.1 million to deliver these projects or be in a position to deliver these projects. Again, staff would be recommending flexible tendering in the spring. Well, we'll say winter, January, February, to see how things go. We know that Minden had difficulties tendering one of their structures that came in significantly over budget. So we'd want to make sure that we would be probably with strategically, we'd probably start with the Drag River Bridge being a very important route with a significant cost plus the work that's involved. We want to get that out early to make sure that we could adjust depending on the prices that we do get for that project. So we may need to come back to council for pre-approval for some of these projects, if depending on the timeline of budget approval, that we might want to say tender rate early in January, or say when we get the fleet, we might need to order a truck prior to Christmas to get the RFP out.
I guess if I could just interject, another important consideration is getting the loan, the interest rate locked in. And I know that Andrea has had conversations with Infrastructure Ontario already. We would want to lock that in as quickly as we can, just in, with the expectation that interest rates will go up sometime next year. So we've begun that work already, but finalizing this number will help us understand exactly what we'll require in terms of amounts.
Councillor DeVolen.
So in following that line of logic, Mike, are there elements of this budget, like equipment with lead times and that loan, that we could be in a position for that part for pre-approval, as early as like before the end of the year, so we could get that in and get it started, having been through the mechanics of that funding for those? It takes a little bit. Is that your thoughts or your goal, that we potentially before the end of the year on a couple of those things move forward?
Yeah, I think we were waiting to see how these conversations went, and if we got the sense council was close to the number, then I think we would be bringing some reports forward asking for pre-approval. If there was still a lot of conversation about certain areas that we were kind of up in the air, we would probably hold off with those reports. But if we get the sense that we're in the ballpark, then you may see some of those reports before the end of the year.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the thoughts that's going through my head is, and it was a conversation of when we borrowed money to catch up with our roads. We're borrowing money to catch up with our bridges. And, we knew this was coming because of the bridge report last year, but is always a concern is, you're doing that catch up year. Now bridges last a lot longer, but should this be spaced out a little bit so that in the future that this we don't have that crunch where this occurs again. And also, I'm sorry if I hadn't read this correctly, or if I missed, the borrowing is over a how many year period? And are we going to talk about that? Or is that in here and I missed it?
No, let's see. So excellent questions, Councillor Roberts. We'll definitely be looking at the overall program of you're right. You don't want to create a bulge 50 years from now or 30 years from now. However, some of these roads and the structures with the decks, we also don't want to run into closures of roads and significant detours. So there's definitely a balancing act there. Director of Corporate Services touched on the loan amounts earlier on. The rate, I believe, is 2.26, and we would be looking for a similar sort of loan as the roads, like a 10-year repayment type term. But we would certainly be bringing a report, a more detailed report to council. Again, just trying here, eliciting some of the interest or how where you are on the amount. So we wanted to get some of that sense of where council was wanting to head, and then we can bring that back with a more detailed report on these as we also refine some of our numbers that are in this table so that we could show a more full picture. For council's benefit, there was a pretty detailed report provided back in August of 2019 regarding the road funding. There was also a companion financial report talking about the debt component. And then in 2020, I believe July, there was a report when the loan for the roads was finally secured. So there's a few good example reports out there that we'd be following, and not trying to recreate the wheel, but make sure that we gave council all the information they required to make an informed decision.
Any other questions? Carry on, Robert.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. And here's just a figure showing the roads. There is a minor typo on this one whereby you'll note that the County Road 16 culverts are showing up the wrong road there on County Road 13. Those culverts are down there on County Road 16 that runs off of Highway 35 over to Bat Lake Road. Next slide, please. And this would be the tentative project listing for 2023 for structures. Again, subject to change depending on conditions and results of the 2022 OSIM inspection. But this is just for council's benefit for what is included in that chart. So for the bars that were shown earlier, that's where we get the 1.2 million. So it does drop a bunch. Some of those projects that we're noting in 2022, depending on how council wishes to proceed, maybe carryover or maybe deferred a year. We are working with our bridge inspector, sorting that out because we understand that there's definitely financial restrictions and we have to figure out if council suggests you can only get a $3 million loan, we have to figure out what can we do with that. We've just prioritized again that worst case scenario in 2022 of if we can catch up, this is the amount, and it's very similar to what was shown to council last December. Next slide, please. Now, here's the fleet one that I was mentioning before. We've shown a green line that was, I guess, decided at council last year as a sustainability number, that green line of about $618,000. The blue bars are showing kind of the expected, expense and expenditure on equipment. They're not showing the expected revenues. This is just kind of showing, just again, the expenses for buying the various pieces of equipment. 2021 is showing for this purpose, it's not showing the budget number, it's showing the revised number, including the grade all that council approved a couple of weeks ago. As Mr. Rudder mentioned, that sustainability number, when we're below the green line, we're committing dollars to the reserve to help fund when, for example, in 2025, where we're above the green line and we need additional funds, but we don't have to increase the taxes to cover that. We've got the money built up in the reserves. As we go into the farther in the future with greenhouse gases and different electrical vehicles and the costs, we're really not confident in what our estimated expenditures will be farther out as we go, because the volatility in the market right now makes it very difficult to plan long-term. Next slide, please.
Just question.
Oh, certainly.
No, it's okay. I'm just waiting. It's hard to write and look up. It's okay. So if I may, yeah, back again to that idea of the sustainability, which we all agree on, which is fantastic. Are we taking into that green line a inflation account? So year one example, 600,000, year two is 600,000 plus estimated 2% inflation or estimated. So it's always going up. It's not actually flatline. Is inflation considered here? Which I know nobody has a crystal ball, let me just say that, but all economic projections right now are coming in that we are going to be in a state of higher inflation than we've seen in many, many years.
Yes, through the warden to the council, excellent question. What is being done in the fleet currently is that as the years go through, they've carried an inflation cost within the vehicles themselves. So the sustainability numbers flat and the equipment prices are going up by 1.5%, which as we bring these things together, we need to sync and make sure that we're speaking in the same language, because it's very difficult if you're carrying inflation in one item and not in another. So we do need to be consistent. It's just, again, pulling apart what the numbers are, and as we move forward, I agree with you. It's nicer to show, the 1.5% or CPI, whatever you want to include in there, just so that everybody's on the same page and understands, what we have. But currently, that's what's in there. Some of the costs, you can see that they go up for certain vehicles. if you're looking closely, that's where they've just been increased at 1.5%, which is really at this point in time, a real guess out 5-6 years, knowing what the inflation is going to be over that time period.
Just to follow up, it of course it is a guess, and that's but at the same time we all know that $600,000 in 2021, come 2031, won't get you as far. So I think that we need to be taking all that into consideration and making sure that we are matching our increases accordingly.
Did I see another hand up there, Carol? Okay, sorry. Carry on.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let's see. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, before next slide. So this is similar to Councillor Kennedy's question, I believe. This is one where we're showing that we have a tandem plow that we'd like to purchase next year. So again, as Mr. Rutter said, if discussions are going well, this would be one that we would like to come back with a report to council in a couple of weeks to suggest that we'd like to do the RFP prior to Christmas because there is such a long lead time for that sort of vehicle. The one pickup truck that's in here can certainly wait till next year. We're still waiting for pickups from last year. So that would be to kind of address the comment that was previously made. Then next slide, please. Now moving to the last one is buildings. We're, I guess I would suggest, the farthest away from sustainability with buildings. A lot of changes going on with the registry office and whatnot, and staff resources. So this would be one of our focuses for next year, to just get a better handle on what renovations we're going to do at the land registry office, and how to get utilize the 2019 building condition assessments, which are very thorough, and get those translated into a good and understanding 10-year sort of program for all of our buildings. Next slide, please. Now we'll go through a line by line. Again, these are summary rolled up tables that show select object totals, and they were provided very similar to council in January. Again, we can provide specific details on any item that council would require. Next slide, please. Now regarding the buildings, so not including the patrol yards, they come under a different code, but we have our 4 kind of administrative and daycare buildings. They're found on page 8, 9, 10, and 11. I can note under the administration building, there's no significant changes proposed. There will be a correction to the cleaning contract. We don't really need the $2,000 additional request that's shown there. It's a function of that there's a COVID number that items should be charged to or could be charged to. So we'll be correcting that for the next version. Further to the daycares, as Mr. Rutter mentioned, we'll be visiting both of those facilities to talk with the directors and the people running it to see if there's any specific requirements. For the Haliburton daycare, we're carrying over $12,500 for just general repairs, nothing identified specifically. So there is budget allocated for those sorts of repairs. The registry office, there's $275,000 allocated for renovations and the roof replacement. The roof replacement was identified a number of years ago. We've deferred it a couple of times, and this year we tried to make a decision knowing that there might be these other renovations that could take place, and there might be some grants or other things that we could take advantage of, getting into some green renovations when everything is settled on what will happen with that building.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether to ask this or when we get to the reserve section of the budget. I note that there's nothing being considered to be transferred to reserves for the Prentice Street property, whereas the other buildings there are. And so the reserves look very low for that. No change, it's still at 15,000. I know there's been some extensive repairs, but now might be a good time to start rebuilding that. So that's what I say. I don't know if it's up to you, Robert, or if I wait till we get to the reserve file when that comes.
I can maybe address a little bit. Again, kind of part and parcel of getting to a sustainable number. The second piece, of course, is like you're mentioning, is what's the right reserve for that type of item and the level of service. So we need to do both. And I think with the Director of Finance, Director of Corporate Services, we need to get those targets. We might be, sufficient depending on, Ministry of Housing numbers on certain areas, but we're definitely not sufficient in specific areas. And those are the targets that we need to set in consultation with council to come back and say, here's our sustainable number for something, and here's our target reserve, and here's the plan on how we get there. I guess if hopefully that answers the question, then we can go on to the next slide, I guess. Here we have the 911 program, very minor changes. They can be found on page 17 of the binder. Again, the Director of Corporate Services mentioned the wages and benefits increases. And we have a small increase we're expecting additional revenues. It's again, conservative budget. We've been overachieving that number over the last couple of years. So that's a very conservative increase on the revenues with the development that's been happening and the requests for different permits. We do have an increase for supplies. That's to try and smooth out the Blue Jay occurrences that happen every few years. And so just to address some of the additional costs for signs and equipment, because the vehicles also charged to that item, so the vehicle costs and gas costs. So there's some minor increases there. If we move on to the rail trail, that can be found on pages 20 and 21. Here, highlighting the difference, the provincial and federal funding. 2021 is showing the amount that was received for the ICIP or is intended to be received subject to our successful claims. And the 25,000 is a carryover of the work that we're expecting to claim next year for the signing and the accessibility improvements. We're showing no increase in the wages and benefits. It's not that the wages and benefits aren't going, it's that we allocate from our overhead, from our maintenance workers into this account. So that's why there's a 0% showing there. We are increasing the material and supplies and services. That's to initiate a proactive culvert replacement program. And so really it's an additional $10,000 for materials for culverts with our staff doing the replacement. Contracted services is going up about 15%. That consists of some additional money as calcium and dust present is getting a little bit more expensive. We're also providing some additional funding so that when we do the maintenance grading in the spring and the fall, that we can have a component for compaction if is required for certain areas to help keep to maintain the excellent work that we're trying to complete this year, and so that can be maintained for future years. What else do we have? The capital purchases. Now that shows a big decrease because of the work that we're doing this year. However, the $84,000 that's shown there is made up of the $35,000 on the ICIP carryover work, the signing and the accessibility improvements. We're also suggesting $41,000 for resurfacing. That's going to address the area that Councillor Roberts had mentioned. The idea being that we'll try to address about 5 kilometers a year, whereby we'll be resurfacing and recompacting. So for the whole trail, that's kind of touching the whole trail every 7 years to keep it in great shape. And that's the goal, is that now that we're getting it there, we'd really like to keep it there. The last item is we've proposed a $9,000 amount that for capital improvements to be determined. We're currently going through with the Joint Accessibility Committee, looking at benches and parking lot improvements, signing improvements that likely won't be totally covered by the ICIP grant. So staff are proposing a $9,000 amount that we would report back to council and suggest on things that we would maybe recommend for the year for certain improvements that couldn't be done under that grant, and it could be a continuing amount depending on what council's direction would be.
Any questions there? Okay.
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pat. I didn't see your.
That's okay. I don't expect an answer to this one, Robert, because it's, I was just looking at, after yesterday's at Dysart, cost of living and CPI and on contracts. I note that Rogers fiber contract that we have is flatline. So there's no way and I say, I don't expect an answer today, but could just look into when that current contract expires and if there is a cost of living allowance built into the current one and or something we should look at in the future.
No, excellent question. I'm actually looking into that. I believe there is a cost of living included in here. We've kept the lower number to be conservative, but I'm working with finance so that we'll confirm what's included and when it expires and whatnot. So excellent question. Thank you.
Well done, Robert, on that one. Thanks.
Okay. Next question. Nope. Or next slide. Let's go with that. Now, here we have for our maintenance item. Now, this is a summary page of approximately 18 sub accounts dealing with everything from culverts to winter maintenance. As you can see from these numbers, it's really notwithstanding the wages and benefits. The other numbers are just a rejigging of priorities. So very, very few changes. I could key on a couple of items on the pages. They're shown from pages 22 to 42. But some of the items whereby there's just a change in focus. For example, patching, which is on page 28, we're reducing that budget because there's been some good success with the road program that we're doing, and refocusing some of that money. That's a reduction of about $114,000. Refocusing some of that money on additional ditching or brushing. So kind of a balancing act of trying to stay within very close to zero, understanding that there's different increases with fuel and equipment costs. Those are the items that come through. One of the other new items would be we have on page, where do we have it? On page 33, we have, we're recommending council approved in the spring a temporary construction inspector that helped with our road rehab. It was very successful. I've heard from my counterpart in Algonquin Highlands that he wished that they would have had somebody inspecting their contractor during their road work. Because of the significant program both in roads and structures next year, we're recommending hiring the temporary inspector once again. That's one of the costs for about $37,000. If I could certainly go into any items here, but I'm not sure if council would like to hear about anything else, or would you like to move on?
I think we can move on from the looks of things.
Okay. And here we have our work yards. This is a rolled up number, so this covers all 4 yards. I could note for 2021, we did replace some heaters at Patrol 1, Highland Grove. We're also in the process of repairing the 2 roofs there, the larger one, and that was a result of council approving additional dollars back in July to repair that leaky roof. Like here, the costs are fairly level. Because of the small amount on the rentals and the hired own equipment, there's a $500 difference, but that shows up as a 9% change. Utilities are fairly level. The capital purchases are showing a significant increase. However, if you were to throw in the roof that we're doing in 2021 for comparisons, there's actually a capital decrease, but we're showing the actual budget that was presented to council last year. The $69,000 for capital purchases are made up for a salt storage shed for Highland Grove, that's Patrol 3. We've also got roof repairs and storage bin for Patrol 1. And we're also doing proposing to do garage window upgrades for Eagle Lake. Next slide, please. And then here we have our equipment and fleet object totals. They can be found on pages 82 and 83, and they're summarized here on the slide. For the top line there, the sale proceeds, that's just the expected money that would be returned for the decommissioning and auctioning off of the equipment that is getting replaced under the fleet program. I did mention that our 2021 number, we haven't sold everything, but the first item that we sold, we got significantly more than we were expecting. And once we list the grade all and whatnot, we're expecting additional revenue for 2022. We have the wages and the benefits as previously noted. We have some small increases in vehicle parts. One of the big increases is fuel. We're implementing our system. We're now fully on using our tanks, so we're not using credit cards at gas stations. So we're recouping that in the card lock system, although it won't save us any gas money. It's just very close to being implemented. The testing is almost completed, and I think it'll be live in the next week or two. We have a small increase in materials, supplies, and services, and then the last line is just showing that capital purchases transferred to reserves of that kind of $618,000 number. That's whereby the expected expenditures on vehicles this year is in the 530s, and then the balance is going into the reserve to build up the reserve for, as we pointed out in that figure about 2025, where we're going to be above that 618 mark. Next slide, please. On our engineering budget, we've kind of held our own. Again, with COVID, there's been some limited training opportunities, so we expect to be under budget this year, and we're kind of keeping things static as I try to feel my way through the system and see where we can maybe look for improvements or rejig things. As I could have mentioned earlier in the maintenance where the rejigging was done, that's thanks to Sil and his guys, Drew and Greg, because of their experience of knowing where they'd like to focus things on a little more as we get into the next year's budget. I hope to get into this one a little bit more, but we want to just keep things level and go with that zero-based budgeting. I believe our vacation and whatnot is lower in this one because we've got the new hires of both our engineering assistant and myself. So our vacation and whatnot is a little bit different and lower. So to explain that number, I guess, and then last slide. And here's our 96. It can be found on pages 100 to 105. Again, rolled up summary page. The big numbers here, again, we're looking at increasing our permits. So that's the third line down, approximately 10%. We do have a few revenue streams, and we do seem to be overperforming year over year. So I think it's best to try to account for those and increase that budget, but not go too far over and run out of and be too overly optimistic. The line below is just the proposed debt of 5.1 million. Again, that's to be determined. The wages and benefits are increased. This account has the manager of operations, myself, and our admin assistant. So that's the biggest impact on the items that Director of Corporate Finances had discussed. We're looking at a decrease in our office supplies based on current usage. We have a small increase on our software, whereby those are the yearly fees that we pay to various items for the memberships and upgrades from DOT to Mesh to AutoCAD and beyond. We continue to reduce our hydro budget for our traffic signals and lights with the LED and improvements. The invoices and bills coming in from Hydro One continue to be lower, so again, cutting this one in half. I guess the last big change is we're returning the insurance deductible back down to 50,000 that was in 2020, with the expectation there's still a $100,000 deductible if there was a claim. However, we plan, if there were to be a claim that we had to pay out, the idea is to use reserves if in the event of a claim such like that. I guess that's it for now, but please let me know if you have any further questions or like any more detail.
Councillor Kennedy.
Not sure, Robert, if that's if this is planning or your department, the County 21 corridor. Couple of issues there with the Industrial Park Road. And for example, we've been talking to you about the ACOM study recommends a pedestrian crosswalk, and we've been pushing for traffic signals at that intersection. I'm not sure if it's your department right at the whole 21 corridor study, I guess, and where we're going with that moving forward.
Mr. Brother, would you like to respond, or would you like me to?
I can. I think we had a lot of conversations during as we were putting the budget together about that, and I think we know that there may be some additional costs required. We are waiting for some information from ACOM before we I guess bring specific things forward, but we recognize that there may be some investments required, and I think we have a backup plan that won't really impact the overall budget, but we know that there may be some additional expenses required there.
Okay, thank you very much, because that's where I was getting this. I didn't notice it in either planning or your budget here, Rob. But could be significant, or some increase in costs or changes. So I'm glad to. Thank you. Anyways, I just wanted to get it on the table.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Kennedy, for asking that. And that's great to hear, because, again, based on ACOM study of 2017, there are changes that are coming and happening. I know county staff have been talking to Dysart staff in terms of projected growth in that area. I know it's a little way out, but for phase 3 of it, the industrial park, as well as there are now, quite a few homes up on College Drive. There are also the student residence that is, hopefully being built in the next couple of years. So it's sort of just looking at that future again. And, so that's great. I'm glad that's being considered.
So any other questions on Robert's presentation overall at this point in time? Well, thank you, Robert. That's a lot of information. I would, although I apologize to our directors and staff who are waiting in the wings, I think we need a break. So I'm proposing that this is a good spot to break for lunch. Is a half an hour sufficient, or do you need a little bit more time than that? It's Councillor Moffat.
I need a little more time for four-legged purposes, with apologies to the gang.
So 45 minutes or an hour? What are you looking for?
Maybe 40 minutes. Not that the world cares about my puppy, but he's been in the house. I got to get him out. So I've got a puppy to take care of.
Okay, so would 1:15, does that sound okay? I'm sorry if the math's not good. Okay.
That works for me. That works for me. Thank you for the indulgence of having a puppy.
Okay. I think there's a lot of information here and a lot to think about. So I think, a good break is definitely warranted. So we'll see you all back at 1:15.
And we're back live.
Thank you. Welcome back to our first round of budget discussions. Next presentation up is emergency measures, emergency services
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Chief Wage. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Ward members of council. Something just happened here. Well, there we go. Welcome to Emergency Services. So we'll just go through the presentation here. Next slide, please, Mike. So emergency services consists of paramedic services, emergency management, our public access defibrillation program, and community paramedicine. Presently, overall, we are within budget. I will explain a couple pressures, or certain pressure we've experienced this year further on in the slides. Operating within that budget is included our additional Torrey Hill upstaff of 36 12-hour shifts, which amounted to about an additional $48,000 this year. The fuel budget is one pressure I'll talk about. A budget of $87,000 was utilized by September 30th, 2021. And our capital update, we purchased our new ambulances, our one new ambulance this year, $147,000. We purchased our 2 ambulance laptops, our public access defibrillation program. We replaced 8 of the units in the community. And we do have 2 command community paramedic vehicles on order, which will be paid for from reserves and the long-term care funding when they arrive. We were hoping to have them the end of August, but Ford were not even building the actual vehicles that would be converted until the date they gave us now is November 15th. So I do hope we have them before the end of the year. One thing about emergency, the ambulance funding is that 50% of our operating budget is funded by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care on the last year's actuals. So budget pressures in 2022, the overtime is always dependent on call volumes and out-of-town transfers, and even just long calls in the community. But fuel prices, I've just listed here, the pressure that we expect to see in 2022 is that in 2019, we were just a little over budget. We had budgeted $87,000. But in 2020, we maintained that budget of $87,000, but you can see the kilometers were extremely increased, and that was due to increased transfers, increased call volumes, but our bonus there was fuel prices were so low at that time. 2021, we've already utilized what we had budgeted, and I estimate by year end we'll use approximately another 27,280 liters, which is a fairly significant overrun. But the other thing that we need to do in 2022 is to investigate some more efficient fuel purchasing methods, whether it be card lock systems or additional tanks in the community. So our sustainability and emergency services, we purchase a new ambulance annually, and we have a purchase of 2 ambulances every 6 years, and then we transfer it to reserves as per our asset management plan. Capital projects for 2022. This is the year we replaced 2 ambulances. Again, the same amount for the pad replacement, which is approximately is $10,000, which should replace 8 units. And I just must add, with the new ambulance purchase, we have been notified from Crestline, which has emerged with Demers now, that we can expect to see a 7 to 15% increase in conversion costs. We haven't got, we're delayed in getting an actual pricing on a new ambulance because Ford and GM haven't released their pricing on their chassis. But one thing we know is that in previous years, we've received a $10,000 credit on chassis. This year, they're only offering $5,000. So we can see that's a sort of my best estimate I could come up with for the 2 ambulance purchases. IT capital is about $18,000. That'll be it'll be staff computers in the Minden and Torrey Hill base, ambulance laptop, and the ambulance contribution to the new servers. For Torrey Hill, we've seen some excellent results with staffing at 24 hours per day. increasing by adding that night shift. As I've shown in a couple of previous reports, our times when we have 0 ambulances in the community at night has plummeted. So recommendation is that we staff, starting in 2022, that we staff Torrey Hill Base 24/7 on a permanent basis, again, beginning January 1st. And to ease into this, the recommendation is utilize Safe Restart funding to staff the 24/7 from January 1st to May 20th, 2022. And then we already have in the budget from the May 2/4 weekend to Thanksgiving. And then we pay the balance of the year, October 11th, December 31st, using the tax levy, which a correction here, it's about 135,000, not 110. As we were doing the slides, things changed fairly rapidly. So you probably noticed in the Director of Corporate Services that amount was 135,000. We have to recognize that if we make this commitment for 2022, then approximately 140 to 150,000, there would be 140 to 150,000 addition in the 2023 budget, which would staff the January 1st until the May 2/4 weekend. So that's sort of the highlights of the year. These are the line by line sort of highlights that some are small amounts, or smaller amounts, but they represent sort of a large percent increase. So those are the sort of the ones I just sort of hit on and highlighted. So if you'd like me to start, I'll just start right into them. Wages and benefits, we're seeing a fairly large increase here, 637,000, mainly due to the upstaffing of the Torrey Hill base and the wage equity increase, and also just the negotiated wage increases. And that's on page 109. Also on page 109, at computer equipment and parts, firewall replacements at bases, that is an increase of 1,897. Page 109, the recommended internet service increase for Haliburton base, so an increase of $7,150. Vehicle fuel, which I discussed earlier, seeing the increasing kilometers traveled, liters utilized, and the present price per liter, we're estimating an increase of $63,000 in fuel usage this year. Increase in the telephone services, that's just due to our answering service and that's just due to service actuals, which is an increase of $2,000 with our answering service. And computer hardware and purchases, an additional $3,792, and that's ambulances, the ambulance service portion of a core switch purchase and a portion of the new servers. And purchase of vehicles, this year we purchased 2 ambulances, and as per sustainability and increasing manufacturing costs, that increase is approximately $201,000. Again, I'll have a better idea when I get my when I get an estimate from Crestline. And next slide, please. And the community paramedic program, this is the original community paramedic program funding, which is invoiced to HHS. So there's really no change. We invoice 100% of one community paramedic and some fuel costs or mileage costs. Next slide. Next slide, please, Mike. The long-term care initiative. This is our first complete budget year. 100% of it is funded by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. So I've laid out the budget, and as best we can estimate where the what will cost what. So I think we'll have a better idea where we stand and how we laid it out in 2022 when we see what the costs were in that budget. And next slide, please. Is there one more, Mike? I thought there was one for, yeah, there we go. So emergency management, this includes emergency management and just supplies for the public access defibrillation program. Just included additional $1,000 in the possibility of using a facilitator for an exercise next year. And that's all. So I'm open to questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Waite? I'm wondering, Tim, if you foresee needing an extra paramedic for the community paramedicine and long-term care programs?
Our challenges this year have been, we are going to be hiring, presently the community paramedic program has a commander and 2 active community paramedics. And we plan before Christmas to hire the additional 2 full-time community paramedics. So we will have 4 on the road 24 or 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is fully funded. There is funding in the long-term care funding to cover that. The reason for the delay is the ability to just staff our ambulances. Once we pull full-time staff off, we lose some of our part-time complement backfilling and filling those positions. So our main priority is to make sure we maintain our 911 coverage. And we sort of did a soft start for the community paramedic program, starting with 2, and we'll add the additional 2 hopefully within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Are there any other questions on emergency services? Councillor Roberts.
Thanks. And maybe it's just to like the long-term planning of the paramedicine program, because I believe our funding was a 3-year program.
That's correct. It goes to March 31st, 2024.
Which, you know, you could just say on one hand, oh, that's way in the future. But on another hand, if we are finding that beneficial, the earlier that we lobby and advocate for the continued funding, we'd hate to see something we've seen it before where, you know, it's successful and it's helping and it's reducing hospital time and costs elsewhere. I'm just wondering, I just thinking about it, I know it's not necessarily budgeted, but that we certainly don't want to be saying, oh, well, we gave you the startup, now you got to fund it. Because that could be tricky. Yeah.
I might be getting ahead of Mike, but one of the things that we had presented at the last Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus was a presentation by the paramedics looking for a more permanent program, a longer term, and in more municipalities. So I think that there's probably a fair bit of advocacy going on and an approach to the province about that. Mike, did you want to say something?
I have nothing to add. That's great.
So any other questions for Tim? Okay, you're getting off pretty easy, Tim. Thanks very much.
Right,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
I did just think of sort of one other question in terms of, you know, staff and change and recruitment, and it's difficult in other areas. And I believe that there was a lag in being able to write some final exams for paramedics due to COVID. Like, is there a shortage of people when we put out applications for part-time or full-time?
It has been a struggle. And that, yes, what happened was when COVID hit, a lot of the colleges, the students were unable to finish their ride-alongs, so they're unable to graduate, delayed in writing their provincial examinations. So that delayed it. The other thing, and we've done several hirings this year. We always seem to get lots of applicants. You pick the best ones you can. And I can tell you, 2 rounds ago, we put offers out to, I think it was 6 or 8, and then it comes down to the 11th hour and we're only left with 2 because some other service closer to home has hired them, or they got a job offer somewhere else. So we are just in the process. We have just recruited. I think we've been fairly successful. We put job offers out to 6, and so far we have 5 that are hopefully for sure going to come on board with us as well. The other thing that we did different this round of recruitment is we had students that were riding out, and all those students we offered jobs to. As I said, you know, they've just went through a 450-hour interview. So if we like you, you know, that want to get you on board. So out of the 5 students we had riding, 4 did apply, and we have them coming on board as well. So
Well, that's good to hear. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, sir.
thank you.
Next up is library. And welcome to our new library CEO, Chris Stevenson.
Thank you so much. Do I have the floor, Warden Danielson?
You do. Go for it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me here to speak today on behalf of the library board and the staff. If I haven't met you already, especially Councillor Burton, Councillor Kennedy, and Councillor DeVolen, my name is Chris Stevenson, and I'm the new CEO and the Chief Librarian at the Haliburton County Public Library. And this past month, I've been getting to know the community, my team here at the library, as well as municipal staff across the county, to see what we're in for in terms of our strengths together and our challenges. And I think we're off to a good start already. So if I could, please have the first slide. Thank you. And before I get started, I just wanted to let you know that my predecessor, the interim CEO, and the library board worked very hard to establish a budget quite promptly as Anna Bablik was leaving. And so some new information has come in, which will likely impact our 2022 budget numbers for next year. And I'm going to need to circle back to my board to update them on some of the new information that's come in the last 10 days or so. So please know that what you'll be seeing today may change. My projected analysis at this point is that we'll probably have revenue go up in some areas and expenses go down. So the numbers will look a little better. It will be an iterative process for us, and that we're very nearly there. Next slide, please. So the library is at a crucial and an exciting crossroads. And as a new resident myself, I'm told that change is happening across the county. And I certainly see evidence of newcomers in the for sale signs that I pass on the way to work, and also in the library memberships that we're signing people up for this year as well. And to address the ongoing change, my staff, the board, and I really plan to stay in lockstep with modernization initiatives in the county in order to meet and exceed public expectations at the library. And I think modernization is a hopeful word. It's one that I've been hearing a lot since I got here. And I'd like to remind you that the library can and already does play a role in this ongoing development. But to summarize in a sentence why I'm here today, it's really to share with you that the library has been growing the last few years beyond its capacity, and we simply can't maintain the same level of service across the system with the current staff complement. So we do need to catch up a little bit as we've hit a bit of a wall, and we're hoping that that time could be now. Next slide, please. Because it is an exciting time at Haliburton County Public Library, we've been able to attract some new expertise in established roles. And these are people who will transform programs and services with fresh eyes and new ideas. And in fact, the staff in any library are trained library workers, but the team is composed of librarians. And as you may know, librarianship is a profession that requires a master's degree. And many libraries and boards, especially in rural communities, work hard to attract credentialed librarians in the same way that they might endeavor to draw in doctors and nurses. And I believe that if you spend time in libraries with trained staff, that you should notice a difference. And as it turns out, we're also fortunate to have almost 4 library technicians. So the number on the screen actually needed to be updated. Sorry about that. It's four library technicians, and these folks are trained in all aspects of library functioning, from cataloging to programming as well. Next slide, please. So specifically at Haliburton County Public Library, we're working to improve a library user's online experience, always. And usually this is the first point of contact with us before they come to enjoy services and programs in person. And so we're doing this by updating the website in the next 6 months and incorporating what's called Biblio Commons. And this is a user-friendly improvement in searching and other features. And it's actually considered the gold standard for what people have come to expect in libraries. And it's a little cheaper than our current ILS system, which is actually over 15 years old and no longer does all the things, all the bells and whistles that we need it to have. So we're overdue in that area. But these changes to user experience in the back end are really just the start. Library work is very much customer service focused, and we're always on the front end of providing top-notch service to our community through Reader's Advisory, for example, innovative and engaging programs, and also by assisting community members with technology so that they have access and support to navigating in their lives in an increasingly online world. Next slide, please. It's a unique role that we have for many of these things, and it's the case that often we're the only place in town to get this specialized help. And what's more, because the library is for everyone, we're also finding that the 21st century has evolved to include digital literacy, because not everyone may have the tools that they need to succeed, nor the opportunity to learn skills that they need to function. And here it's the case that often the library is an important equalizer in society. And this is especially true, as you probably know, about internet access, as it's clear that there are people who have it, many who don't, and there are others who simply don't have adequate options in their area at this time. And so the library fills that gap often too. But I need to tell you that there's also always a huge demand for large print resources, for example. This is books with larger text or font that can aid people who may be visually impaired. And so these traditional expectations remain at the library. But because fortunately we know our public and we know our demographics as they're changing, we're strong in these non-technical areas too. We're poised to launch a new strategic plan and an operation and action plan for the future to communicate a fresh vision along with updating our mission and values. And we're going to be potentially rebranding the library at the start of this as well. As the pandemic hopefully comes to a close in the coming months ahead, we aim to be ready to meet complex community needs through partnerships, skills development for both our staff and community members, and also by creating a new organizational chart that's going to better optimize the use of library staff and resources. If I could have the next slide, please. So I thought it would be helpful to look back at where we've come from in terms of staff size, because you're hearing that while library work has become more complex over the last few years, what's actually happened in the past 10 or so is we've actually experienced a net loss of key staff. And this has been due to retirements and contracts ending. So this has resulted in what's called position creep, as library workers with their helper spirit attempt to fill the gaps we've been experiencing and meet community demand where it's needed. So this is, of course, it's been unsustainable, and we need to continue to attract and retain, talented staff to fill these gaps in the years ahead. So I acknowledge this theme may be familiar to other department heads and organizations in the county, also realizing growing pains at this time. We need to continue staff learning and training to support residents and deal with social and security issues as they come up. These are increasingly impacting our communities and libraries across Canada. And again, it comes back to complex human needs. If I could have the next slide, thank you. The library already does play a role in referrals, providing information and running educational programs for the public. But earlier this month, we responded to a highly distressed patron experiencing a crisis in and around the library who was back in the area and didn't know where to turn. And of course, staff responded by reaching out. They did an amazing job getting advice from local organizations, and we worked to formulate a short-term plan, which also included administering first aid. So incidentally, dealing with these issues of mental health, topics of social work, and well-being in the library have become more commonplace, certainly during my career, where we once learned to help people with their new hobbies or researching their next career. We're actually helping now people as they dip into services, addressing the lower half of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, seen here. It's simply the case that the range of questions that we've been getting over the past decade have changed. So we're busy in ways like this that the public rarely often sees, mainly because we're committed to patron privacy, but also we just operate with discretion and help where we can. Yet also at the library, it's no longer practical, nor is it possible that the same person who's tasked with managing staff in our branches would also be responsible for rolling out technology support in-house for library-related software and training, which of course there's lots of that. And so when staff are spread thin, the morale and empathy-based organizations such as ours tends to suffer. So I'm mindful of maintaining that morale. We also need help with communications, and that's a priority in a library system over a large geographical area. And while it was something that was once done with, a CEO issuing press releases, now getting the message out about the great things that we're doing at the library to reach people across the county involves a job, monitoring and creating content for diverse channels. So social media and creating, for example, the right meme on platforms such as Instagram, because we do aim to meet people where they may be at, and that changes with time. All that to say, the library has its fingers on the pulse of community change, and we need to evolve and adapt with our residents and visitors to properly serve at any given time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we do have a plan for the future. It's a good plan. It's been developed over the last 6 months. It's a plan that's endorsed by me, and it comes approved by the library board. And this plan includes, it requires an increase in funds to allow for 1.5 new positions. And I'd like to, I'm here today to make this ask on behalf of the library board, the staff, and the community. I could have the next slide. For what is in fact an 85% or $85,000 increase. So I'm sorry, that's not supposed to be 120,000. $85,000 increase in the funding we would receive from the county for hiring in these new roles. This increase would allow us to cover also sick time for part-time staff, which is something I believe has become more important during a public health crisis, so that people will be more inclined to stay home when they're ill, as we are on the front lines of the pandemic in that sense. And like I said, please note that the numbers shown in the budget are not currently reflecting this amount that we're asking for. Two things will be impacting our 2022 budget. They came to my attention fairly recently and before I could meet with the library board again. So I'll be connecting with them later today to discuss a change in payroll liabilities actuals that came in, as well as how pay equity considerations need to be factored into our budget for the final version. So thanks for your patience with that. We are going to get the numbers right. And I can assure you that this plan to add positions will result in a better functioning library system, consistency across the county and all our branches, and that staff will be also taken care of so that they can continue doing this essential frontline work. We do have energetic young staff now who are committed to the library, and this plan endeavors to reduce precarity and also better reorganize a fairly nimble team so that we can staff our libraries properly into the future. And so that also these remain jobs that the library workers will want to stay in and to grow in, because there are competitive libraries in nearby areas. So I do thank you for considering this request. And at this point, I'll be pleased to take any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Chris? Councillor Dvolan.
Well, just your comments, Chris. And hello, wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
You speak of and I may not have the terminology right, but social and re-engineering, and certainly as you refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is new ground for this region. And I don't need the answer to it all today, but just that's an evolution of kind of historically what libraries have been, and I am not on the board, which 4 members of council are, so there might have been discussions and things that have gone on in the months and years that have preceded us today. But from somebody that isn't part of that, I just need some more information and context. And that's not even just to do with the money that, you know, the $85,000 ask. It's just apart from it. It's a, you know, and where my mind goes with this, we're in the midst of dealing with community and safety well-being, which is, now that's coming from a policing perspective, but just basically a whole new mix of how we look after a number of these things in our community, of which in that context, library as a component of it hasn't been foremost in my mind. And there may be others that have questions that relate to this, but that's just, I thought I should at least table my thoughts here with you as we're at the beginning of the budget process here in Minden for comments now and obviously as we go along with our budget process in Minden. So thank you.
Thank you for the question, which is a great one. And to illuminate on what I mean by social and security challenges, not just here, but across libraries across Canada. For example, I recently picked up a Narcan and a naloxone kit because we have heard that there are young people, young adults just behind the library who may be exposed to potential opioid crisis topics. And so truly, these are topics of social work and mental health. And when I was in library school, they didn't really prepare us for the changes that were happening in society. And oftentimes people do come to the library as a first resort or a last resort, and somewhere in their journey to get help that is a little bit more complex than it was, you know, when I was a kid, for example. And so we're working with partners. And the good news is we've reached out to Point in Time and the Youth Wellness Hub and YMCA Women's Shelter for ways in which we can better understand the challenges happening around us, right in our backyard, really, here in Dysart, and also be prepared, so preemptive. So I hope I will never have to use a naloxone kit like I did in my last library. But you know, in-house, we're learning to train ourselves to be prepared because we have seen our counterparts and colleagues across the country and dealing with these new topics.
Councillor Roberts and Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. And I am on the library board, and so I have a little bit more insight into the request than the county councillors that aren't. One of the things our interim CEO, Anna, who left, it was great to have someone come in with a set of fresh eyes. And although we didn't necessarily ask for an organizational review, if you will, you know, she was tasked with looking for opportunities and everything. So we had a really excellent meeting at night in August, and it was lengthy, about changes that she felt would be beneficial. And so we, you know, she sort of had this proposal, and I think so, and there was a nice overlap between her and Chris coming on, and so he's been able to, you know, really review that and sort of make his own way. And I think two of the things I'd really like to highlight, and one is the, it may not be a big cost, but it is the benefits to part-time employees. It's very hard to find really great qualified staff and ask them to go do a 4-hour shift or a 3-hour shift in Wilberforce and outlying area. And then also, so there's a lot of people that at the library that work part-time and they weren't getting any entitlements. And so I think I'll speak for that as a board member that we felt that was really important. And then Chris alluded to the fact of the information and technology, and I think we're all struggling with that in our lower tier municipalities. And I believe, you know, Algonquin Highlands actually hired a communication person, and to have somebody who's really that front and center person whose responsibility it is, because there's an expectation that social media posts be absolutely current and monitored and answered. So the world is changing, and the library complement of staff has not changed. And so this is the bump in the year. We're not going to be coming, I doubt, year after year and trying to grow our staff. I think the justification is that we're trying to get caught up and have our staff meet the needs that the community has has expectation of. So that's all.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Chris, and welcome to Haliburton Highlands. Question on probably more clarification for me. The initial request that I see in the budget binder is for $150,000, 14.4% increase over last year. So is that 100, the 120 earlier, the 85 now, is that in addition to that $150,000 request?
No, certainly not, but thanks for asking. The numbers really do need to be reworked because we had some revenue lines were removed, and I've been asking questions and I just got some answers about why that was. So that'll come back. And then the total request for the increase in wages and benefits lists right now on page 119 as 120,000, and that's what would come down to 85,000. The 120 would have been for 2 wages, but we also reran the numbers to make sure that the wage and the benefits were separate, which wasn't done in one of the original scenarios we ran. So that's why I expect
the taxation transfer will be less then.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I've got a question that I maybe should know the answer to, but has the library and the interim and CEO and yourself had any involvement in the community safety and well-being plan discussions to this point?
So I haven't been sitting on any of these boards yet, but I'd like to be a part of that conversation if I could, yeah.
Councillor Moffat, I think because you're going to respond to this question a little bit or follow up.
Yeah, I am. I don't want to sound obstructionist, but I'm not sure that there's a role for the library in the community safety and well-being plan because the bodies that populate that board are social service providers. I think there's definitely a role for the library based on what Chris has just said about reaching out around some vulnerable sectors of society. I think there's definitely a role for some connection there, but I'm not quite sure that there's a role for the library to be on it because the county's already on it. So we can explore that. But if I may, just by extension, I'm also on the library board and I'd be interested in our meeting this afternoon to find out more from Chris about that outreach that he's done. Because libraries absolutely are changing and need to morph with time. We also don't want to reinvent the wheel for other agency work that's being done, but certainly the library as a community hub and a growing community hub is definitely a place for some of those alignments to occur. So I look forward to learning more about that later today, hopefully.
Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, and just not belabor point. And so I understand we're in a changing society, and I'm definitely usually an embracer of change. But in Chris, your reference to your colleagues and your previous places that you've been, what I don't understand is the community change that you're in, that how the library is dissimilar than how we may treat our museums or cultural center or our community center, because on a daily basis, our staff there are bumping into some of the very same things that you're bringing forth there. And again, I'm not looking for an answer. I'm just looking, I'm an inspector gadget type of guy. I want to understand how all the pieces go together and how that's dissimilar, and whether it's just specifically the library or part of a larger discussion about assets that we have that large numbers of the public are there on a regular basis. And I'm done commenting on that. I think I've laid enough of the picture out there, but I would be happy that if those of you that are on the library board, as you go through some of this, if you can offer some explanation or some reporting back from Chris in the future, where those kind of discussions go in the context of our community.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll do that.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just one last thing that I think we say every year, but what's worth repeating is that the provincial library operating grant is the same. It never increases, not 2%, not 1.75. It's flat. And I talked about inflation earlier today. So basically, the county has been receiving the same amount. I think it's 110,000 for close to 20 years, I believe.
Years. Yeah,
So
or more.
it adds pressure if that had been increasing year over year or something. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, well, we look forward to meeting you the next time, seeing what changes might have occurred to your budget, and I'm sure that those of us that are on the board look forward to hearing some clarifications later on in our discussion.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, next up is planning. I guess we're leaving the best for last, Steve. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you, Warden.
You're
Daniel
not going to
Smith.
get away with giving your whole presentation on mute.
Well, I do thank you and council for this opportunity. It is a pleasure, and I would ask that Mike bring up the presentation for everybody's benefit. So thank you. If you could go to the next slide. So I'm fortunate to be the Director of Planning and overseeing the following programs and cost centers. Planning, which is the municipal plan review function, really assists with major planning developments and applications, as well as local official plan reviews. Land Division Committee, which processes consent applications for the county and for municipalities, and also administers the Land Division Committee. GIS, which stands for Geographical Information Systems, really provides mapping services for the entire county and for the 4 municipalities. And also is doing some special work on LiDAR and bathymetry surveying this year. Bylaw enforcement, which includes forestry and shoreline bylaws. Really, this function is for permits as well as compliance oversight for the county. Climate change, which is involved in policy development to reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in the county. And finally, the community transportation portfolio, which is helping council develop policy options for future transit opportunities. And from time to time, council does assign the planning department and special projects, and the big one that was assigned this year was the review of the new shoreline preservation bylaw. Next slide, please. Looking at the operating update for 2021, the planning operating budget is expected to be under budget, and that's primarily due to staffing changes this year. Land Division Committee is under budget as well, but council will note that we did process more applications with fewer meetings. And as a result of that, our revenues were up due to increased user charges. The GIS operating budget is under budget as well, and that's related to COVID difficulties, the late start in the mapping and surveying work that was really didn't get off the ground until the end of summer, early part of fall. Bylaw, the forestry shoreline operating budget is expected to be under budget, and this is primarily due to council's review of the new shoreline protection bylaw with its consultants. Climate change operating budget is under budget as well, and this is because of fewer than expected mitigation projects being approved. And finally, with community transportation, this is under budget due to no projects being completed this year, and the monies here will be transferred to reserve for future county programming. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the capital budget for planning in 2021, there was two projects that we were working on. The first one being the GIS, 123,000 was available and assigned to continue the National Disaster Mitigation Program. I mentioned the LiDAR mapping and the bathymetry surveying. And again, it's below budget simply because field activity wasn't happening the early part of the year due to COVID. In terms of climate change, $15,000 was allocated by council for installation of EV charging station outside the county administration building. 6,100 of these monies were recovered with the cost sharing agreement with Minden Hills. Next slide, please. Looking forward into 2022 and funding opportunities, at the moment, there are no specific programs out there, but we will be looking for future intakes of the National Disaster Mitigation Program that will be explored if they are available to help carry on with the floodplain mapping project. As well, with climate change, we'll be looking for funding opportunities for capital and operating when they come available as well. Thank you. Next slide. Budget pressures for the planning department for the next year. Just would like to point out with the GIS program and the ongoing floodplain mapping and the two sub-projects of LiDAR and bathymetry. For council's benefit, there is 730,000 remaining. It's been estimated 250,000 have already been spent on this project. Year to year, the monies that aren't spent are carried over, and council does provide funding of 173,000 in this budget as well for the project to continue. And it's a multi-year project, and it will require council to consider approving further budgets for the next 3 years. Another unknown pressure is LPAT costs. Those are Planning Act appeals of decisions made by council and the Land Division Committee. And the unknown there is legal fees. Some hearings, if they're multi-day, can be very costly, and they're non-recoverable. But it's good to note that the county was not involved in an LPAT hearing in 2021. Next slide, please. Continuing with budget pressures, council is considering the shoreline preservation bylaw, and council will note that 220,581 is being asked for wages to be included in the 2022 budget. And again, this is subject to council's approval, and if you do approve the program to be implemented, it will start in the second quarter of 2022. And this allows council to hire three staff to implement the permit system, as well as undertake compliance monitoring in the field. Climate Change Action Plan. This is the new plan that will be developed in 2022, and council is being asked to continue the funding of $50,000 to implement any mitigation measures arising from this plan. And finally, the rural community transportation. Council is again being asked to continue the funding of $50,000 into 2022. And this will allow council to ask its consultant to look at its previous recommendations, as well as potentially fund future programming in this area. Next slide, please. Considering budget sustainability, council should note that the GIS receives funding for $15,000 each year for the updating of its ortho imagery. And on average, the imagery is updated every 5 years. I mentioned about the LiDAR mapping and bathymetry surveying. The $173,000 is provided to council or by council for the enhanced floodplain mapping project. I mentioned previously about the climate change funding of $50,000. Again, as opportunities arise, this money allows council to approve adaptation projects. Rural transportation, again, with $50,000 for future transit programming as seen fit by council. And with that, it serves to make the planning department sustainable. Next slide, please. Capital projects for the planning department in 2022 again include the enhanced floodplain mapping project that's underway, and $173,000 is budgeted for that. And I mentioned the $50,000 that is budgeted for climate change mitigation arising from the new plan that council will be considering next year. Next slide, please. So considering the line by line for the planning budget, the first one is the bylaw enforcement line of 50. And I note wages and benefits total and 96,816. This is a 78% increase from what was budgeted in 2001. And council's being asked to consider these monies to allow for the hiring of three new staff to implement the shoreline protection permit system in the last 3 quarters of 2021. When you look at the next line, this is the tree protection or forestry line 54 for contracted services total, and this is 44,800. This budget's been moved into a new cost center and has decreased slightly from last year. And the reasoning because of the forester is opted or is looking at focusing solely on sustainable forestry and weed control programs. And line 51, materials supplies unassigned. This is for climate change, and that remains the same from last year. And line 54, contracted services for the community transportation remains the same as well, and will be transferred to reserves to help council with future programming opportunities. I mentioned earlier in the presentation with the Land Division Committee, line 12, usage charges total, 72,854. This is an increase of almost 19% than that was budgeted last year. And this is because of the increased volume and consent applications being processed, primarily a function of the hot real estate market. And finally, in planning, you have line 50, wages and benefits, most notably the 144,283. This is less than 36 from previously budgeted, and as mentioned, this is because of staffing level changes that occurred this year. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor DeVolen.
Well, thank you. To bathymetry or basically surveying underwater to know depths of water, of which
That's
it was
correct.
wonderful to see this year that the little remote submarine was from the Minden Dam to Gull Lake to that frequently flooded area, and that will be very constructive either with infrastructure or operational changes or maybe some channel dredging if required. But my question comes to be with that in there, the other area or watershed that floods with some frequency and goes up and down very quickly is the Burnt River watershed, in both in Highlands East and in Minden Hills. That's kind of the next hot spot. Is it on our radar in the next year or two to apply some of that technology in that area so we may be able to mitigate some of those things?
Well, certainly, as I mentioned in the presentation, we're expecting opportunities in the new year through the National Disaster Mitigation Program. And as they come about, we will submit our applications for that. This year, we were only able to fund, we sort of anticipated funding 10 projects, and because of some of the costs that were coming our way, we funded 9 out of the 10 projects for the survey work. So we're maxed out this year, but as funding opportunities come next year, we will revisit that with the Conservation Authority.
Councillor Roberts.
Hey, this is changing gears a little bit, but I'll speak to the shoreline preservation bylaw. And I know that's very hard to predict the amounts of wages and benefits, but seeing as the doodle poll says, sadly, that we're not meeting until January.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Well, I'm just being realistic, right? And I'm not saying that we obviously have to have a number in there, but to say that, and probably when you first did your first draft of the budget, you're thinking, oh, you know, we can implement in the first or second quarter, that's April. I don't realistically think that that's going to happen. So I just wonder what other councillors are thinking on that. And just in terms of recruitment and job descriptions and everything else. And then further to that, I know that the recommendation was that there would be no permit fee. So you still have to get a permit in year one, that there would be no fee. So there's no revenue to offset costs at the county, but that the proposal was at some point without a cost, we don't know, but that there would be a permit fee at some point. So say looking into the 2023 budget, is the thought that the revenues will certainly offset, so that it becomes a user fee, because I, as a, you know, individual taxpayers, are not going to want to be paying for other people doing site alterations on their shoreline.
I'm quite glad you brought that up, because as you say, realistically, we're not meeting until the middle of January, basically. And by the time we do a lot of things, there still are, even accepting the report and agreeing to go forward, there's still questions and details that we need to iron out. You know, I would see us more realistically looking at mid-year as opposed to second quarter. So I think that there might be a little bit of savings there. Also, I'm wondering, just a question, why in this year's funding our forestry operating budget would be reduced because we were working on the shoreline preservation bylaw? Like, I don't see the connection there.
I can
So,
it's
okay, go ahead.
it's easiest for me to answer. I think we had included some fairly significant placeholders for salaries and wages and benefits. And we ended up utilizing that for the consultants' fees instead. So it is the consultants' fees were less than we had anticipated spending on salaries and benefits.
Okay, that does answer that. Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
And just a minor question on the shoreline as well. $15,000 for vehicle costs. Are you expecting these inspectors to use their personal vehicle then, or is that the plan for the first year?
Yes, for sure. Yes, that was a good question. Yes, we don't. If there are vehicles available to share, we'll explore that. But it is anticipated that they'll have to use their own vehicles.
Any other questions on planning, Councillor Roberts?
But just if Steve could have an opportunity to continue to answer the question I have, which is that you know, in year one there is no fee for a permit. In year two, that.
Thank you for that question. And the simple answer is yes. There'll be we'll do some research over the next year with regards to fees, but I do anticipate it being much like permit applications for building permits, in line with that for whatever. You could have a graduated system if they're only doing minor landscaping, for example, a certain fee associated that. If they're doing shoreline structures, etc., you could sort of tie it to how the local townships assign fees for building permit activity. So,
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, actually Queen's University has done a great study for the County of Frontenac on this very question. So they have some recommended fee structure in there, and some of them are actually quite surprising how high they are. But they've actually used Minden Hills in a couple of the areas in that document, as well as Lake of Bays, and it's actually it's a good document referring to all shorelines. So good place to start, maybe.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Rutter.
I just wanted to say, we were guessing, and we're not making, to be quite honest, we don't know where council will land on the bylaw. We don't know what the enforcement regime will be. We don't know. Until we get more direction from council on the bylaw itself, it's really difficult for us to predict what will be required even to implement and enforce. So that was our challenge. We know that number has to be, we have to be nimble with that number, let's just say.
And I think that hopefully we'll be a lot further ahead on these discussions before we finalize the budget. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I think what you just said may be along the lines of what I was thinking is it going to be the case that some of these a proposed fee structure or even a flexible fee structure will be part of our conversations around the shoreline bylaw? Because what you don't want to do is end up saying there, which has been expressed by the public and is a legitimate concern, is if we don't have a feel for that, first year is free, and then are the fees so high because they have to cover certain costs that they're a huge shock that upsets everybody? Or is it the intention to look at them and then have a graduated implementation? And I know I'm going sort of more bylaw than budget, so appreciating that for budget purposes there has to be some flexibility. Will we have a suggested or an idea of a fee structure going forward for the bylaw discussion in January? It's not really a budget question.
Well, certainly that's how I will serve the process. I'll do my research and be prepared to answer those questions in January.
Great, thank you.
Fair enough. Any other questions for Steve? Councillor Roberts.
Sorry, I'm fighting with like new cheater reading glasses to see the little fine print in the actual pages. So you referenced the LPAT and that we didn't have any in 2021, but every once in a while when we do, it's cha-ching, it's expensive. So are we adding anything? I'm sorry, I can't find that line quickly. And if not, what's our reserve for that?
So with regards to, I'll have to look myself.
Sorry.
So on page 128, you'll look at the very bottom. It speaks to professional services, I believe. And in 21, it was 3,000, and it's going to be 3,000 as well for 22. So you're absolutely right. If you get into a single day hearing, it's possible that the planning staff can actually do the hearing without any costs incurred. But if you get into a multi-day hearing where you're asking for a lawyer to support you, you can expect to pay anywhere from 10 to 25,000 for a 5-day hearing. So with regards to what we have in reserve for that, I will let the Director of Corporate Services maybe answer that question. When I noted in my presentation that we didn't have any hearings, one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my professional career is to avoid going to the OMB and the LPAT, and I've been rather successful in that. It's usually about doing a lot of work up front to avoid conflict, bring parties together and resolve their issues. But that being said, every once in a while there is a hearing, and we do have to sort of ramp up for that with a lawyer. So.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to ensure that, just because we didn't have one in 2021, that because we have had them since I've been around county council, and I just want to make sure we were still putting money aside to that, building up a bit of reserve, and just keeping an eye on that for those just in case years.
You know something we don't? No, I'm just kidding.
Experience.
I can ask her what she's up to. Could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
A little. I think the nice thing about council's direction and sort of some of what you've accomplished around reserves is that we do have a fairly healthy working reserve. So if we are caught off guard by that, we always have that to fall back on. The other thing I would say is that this isn't a positive, but the LPAT tends to be, it takes a long time. So those costs would be spread over a long period of time, and you would have a lot of advance notice. So if we need to build into a future budget an LPAT hearing fee or professional fees to support us at an LPAT, then we would be able to likely have a future budget to do that.
Any other questions for planning? Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, Council.
So we have a conclusion from, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, just a note maybe for Director of Corporate Services on the reserve sheet. Andrea, would it be possible to highlight which reserves are at sustainable levels? We've spoken quite a bit about trying to get to sustainability, but it's hard to determine which reserve ones are. And I noticed that we generated $63,000 in interest. Where does that money go from the reserves? It doesn't appear to go back to the individual reserve, as some of them are flatlined. So does that just go into general revenues then? And is that,
do you mean the reserves, the income reserve showing on the general administration?
yeah, on the reserve tab. Yeah, you've got a breakdown of all the reserves here.
Yes.
Some are flatlined, and then on the income on your general office, you're showing interest revenue of 63,500. But there's no indication where that money actually goes, at least that I can see in my simple mind.
We just budget for it in general revenues, and so it's
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, I didn't know if it should go back into the individual reserve that generated it, but anyways.
No, it offsets the expenses within general admin.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So you're gonna wrap things up for us?
Okay, yeah, so I know you've received a lot of information today. So I just want to provide one final slide to conclude our budget presentation. Again, the draft that was provided to you today includes an increased tax levy in $956,952. That's largely a result of the increased service delivery as identified in our internal budget pressures presented to you earlier today, along with the wage and insurance increases. This draft does equal a 3.53% tax rate increase. It will leave our reserves at the end of 2022 at approximately $5.5 million. I've provided a list here of the guiding documents that staff have used to help form this budget. And I think that concludes it. We've worked hard to achieve sustainability in most service areas, and we are almost there. We have a few more left to go.
Any questions on the concluding statement or in general at this point in time? Councillor Moffat, then Roberts, then Shell.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I know it's not my job to thank staff. I'm not trying to steal your thunder, Madam Warden. I found, and I did send a note to Mike, to Mr. Rutter over the lunch break. I found this budget easy to read, very well laid out, and really well thought through. So thanks. Good job.
Thank you.
Well, you did steal my thunder.
You can say it too.
Councillor Rutter, there's never enough appreciation or thank you.
We can all say thank you. It's nice to hear some positive, and in light of what I was referring to earlier, I would ask that the line for the shoreline wages and benefits be reduced. I don't think that's realistic, and I would I don't know what the number would be, but I would calculate the number to not be able to at least start, even if it was just a month different or 2 months difference. I would respect or ask rather that if staff could look at a more realistic expectation. We're likely going to be passing our budget, and our shoreline meeting isn't until I think the 17th of January. So why not reduce that line if we can? That's what I would propose. And I don't know by how much.
I think the staff has heard that concern from us, and we will see a change in the next iteration of the budget, based on the comments and the timing of our next meeting. Councillor Schell?
Sorry, I was going to kind of say what Carol did as well. For somebody that gets sweaty palms when I see the budget binders show up, because I'm not a numbers person at all. This was wonderful to be able to follow on the screen and not having to look back and forth a whole bunch. So thank you so much. I actually think I maybe understand it this year. Great job.
Thanks. That's great. Any other comments or questions? Councillor DeVolen?
My comment will kind of dovetail with some of the others. It felt like a second or third draft in a budget, not a first kick at the can. So Mike and the whole staff, it had a mature feel to it right out of the box. So I feel that although we have some things going to take a bit longer, it may not take so many bounces to get to the final product. So thank you.
Yeah, I know. I was just absolutely tickled to hear the first numbers. I really had expected it to be higher, from the get-go, and without having actually looked at it, I thought, oh gosh, we're probably going to have to add to it. And I'm, hearing this presentation and the questions and comments, it's clear, it's concise, and I think it's a really good start. So, as Aaron has been saying, thank you to you, Andrea, to you, Mike, and to all the staff that have worked on this, because I know it's not been easy. Councillor Roberts.
That's okay. We don't want to confuse the two Andreas. So just, I know we have an employee that's only worked 5 days, so we don't expect a budget from economic development, but that's included in planning then? And are we, so I just wondered how that tied in, because we didn't really talk about that too much.
No, we didn't. That's right.
No.
Because we knew this would be a multi-meeting process, we're going to give Scott a month to get his feet under him, and he will actually be presenting his PowerPoint presentation in December.
Thank you.
Yeah, the number hasn't changed a great deal from the tourism and some of the safe restart monies being utilized in economic development, but we certainly want to give him an opportunity to do that presentation in December.
Okay, I think that concludes our first budget discussion, and an excellent one at that. And who said 2:30? I think that it was a pretty good estimate. Again, thanks to all, and I think that all it remains is a mover and a seconder for adjournment for the day. Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Moffat. Sorry, Pat.
I'll withdraw that, Warden Danielson. I made a mistake.
Not necessary.
I have a mover for the adjournment, please. Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Moffat. Thank
It's
you.
nice to do that after my hiatus. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Warden and Councillor DeVolen. Thank you.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you soon. Some of you really soon.
Take care.
Yeah.